Okay, Gene, give us a minute here. Okay. Thank you, Gene. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the 590th board meeting of the California Regional Water Quality Control Board, Central Valley Region in Rancho Cordova. I'm Mark Bradford, Chair of the Central Valley Water Board. I'll introduce the other board members in just a minute. For people who want to for people who want to listen or to watch the meeting online today, the board's customary webcast is available. We are receiving presentations and public comments here at the meeting and online through a Zoom meeting platform. If you're here at the meeting and intend to present or comment or think you might be interested in commenting, you should have filled out a speaker comment card, the blue card, available at the front of the boardroom entrance. If you are online and planning on commenting, you should already be in the Zoom meeting room using the meeting ID and password provided by board staff. If you have not already received this information, you can email us now at agenda5@waterboards.ca.gov. That address is agenda followed by the number 5 with no space at waterboards.ca.gov. Include speaker comment in the subject line so we can follow up with you. For those in the Zoom meeting, you will be on mute and your camera turned off until it is your turn to speak. Our meeting host will then unmute you and ask you to turn on your camera if you have one. When you are done speaking and the board members have completed asking questions, you will be placed on mute and your camera turned off. I will now introduce other board members as follows. Denise Cadera on my left here from Allensworth. Lena Lee Reeder, also to my left from Sacramento, and Sean Yang from Sacramento. Nicole Morgan, the State Water Board member liaison, is participating in this meeting and will provide an update a little later. I will now introduce Executive Officer Patrick Palupa, who will introduce his staff. Before that, please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good morning, Chair Bradford, members of the board. Hard to believe it is December 14th. I don't know about you, but this season is flying by for me. I'll introduce my staff. To my far left is Adam Lappitz, Assistant Executive Officer in the Rancho Cordova office. To my immediate left is Mindy Maxwell, Executive Assistant to the board and Party Planner Extraordinaire. Thank you for everything that you did for last night. To my right, I think she's disappeared into the audience. To clear something up real quick is Jessica Yar from the Office of Chief Counsel, our senior staff counsel. Across from me is Bailey Toft Dupuis and Kennedy Knight, also from the Office of Chief Counsel. To my immediate right-ish is JJ Baum, Assistant Executive Officer in our Rancho Cordova office, and Christina Shoup, the most recent addition to our executive team up from the Fresno office. In the audience, we have a number of staff, including Clint Snyder, Assistant Executive Officer in the Reading office, and a number of supervisors as well. So that's the team here today. And back to you.
Thanks, Patrick. Agenda item 2, are there any communications from board members since the last meeting? Down the row here. There we go.
Okay, I'll go ahead and kick it off. On October 16th, I've met with the environmental groups regarding the nitrate control implementation. And on October 23rd and 24th, I attended the Water Quality Coordinating Committee meeting.
Good morning, everyone. On the 16th of October, I participated in the nitrate control implementation program meeting. On the 18th, I met with a Zoom meeting with Veronica Farwell from the State Water Board Office of Public Participation, Equity and Inclusion Program. On the 23rd and 24th of October, I also participated in the Water Quality Coordinating Committee Annual Conference. November the 7th, I participated in the Central Valley Air Quality Legislative Tour for Allensworth. On the 2nd of November, I did a meeting tour with State Senator Melissa Hurtado at a regenerative agriculture farm, a demonstration project in Wasco. On the 14th of November, I met with Laurel Firestone, State Board Member Laurel Firestone and Andrew Antevolt. We were discussing administrative issues and trying to address some of the water board, not water board, but district, community services district water needs. On the 15th of November, we met with representatives from UC Berkeley, convened a group of communities impacted from the flooding. On the 17th of November, I participated in the Integrated Climate Adaptation and Resiliency Program Technical Advisory Council, of which I serve. And I'm not done yet. On the 6th of December, I participated in the Management Zones Implementation Program Workshop. And then on December 7th, we had the representatives from the Department of Water Resources, Office of Emergency Services. Many agencies came into Allensworth to give us an update on emergency services as we go into the winter season and preparing for flooding. And just on a high note that I would personally like to share is we had a Allensworth running club that got started in September, and the coach trained them. We're talking about our age group 6 to 9. As they participated in tournaments, each tournament they all qualified to go to the AAU national tournament, national championships in Tallahassee, Florida. And of those 8, they came in the top 25 in the nation. 3 of them were in the top 7. 2 were in the top 10. 1 was in the top 13. So Allensworth is on the map. And I share all these things because my role here on this board is to represent the environmental justice group. So there's a lot of activity going on, and I'm happy to be a part and to represent those constituents. Thank you very much.
Well, the Central Valley is a hotbed, I guess, for cross country. There was a movie about a group in McFarland that did cross country, which was awesome. So congrats on that. Sounds like you don't have time for your retirement, but that's okay. I also attended the WQCC meeting, the Water Quality Coordinating Council meeting in October. And then a few days ago, participated in a Management Zone Implementation Plan workshop that was attended by members of the coalitions and environmental justice communities. So it was very open conversation. There was some good dialogue, and it was educational to sit through that. I think that was it for me. Yep. And John, you okay? Okay. All right.
And I'll add for members of the board that are jealous of Denise and Mark's participation in the Management Zone Implementation Plan meeting from a couple weeks ago. We will be having a full hearing in front of the board, probably around the April timeframe, to discuss many of the same issues. We still have an open comment period, and my gratitude goes out to Angela Laban, who is the new CV Salts program manager, for running that meeting and setting up a very useful dialogue between the stakeholders and environmental justice groups and some of the dischargers that are working on implementing the early action plans and drinking water programs in that area. So stay tuned. There's more to come there, obviously.
Thanks, Patrick. Okay, moving on to agenda item 3, it's time for the State Water Board Liaison update, and Nicole Morgan is here to provide that update.
Good morning, Chair Bradford and members of the board. I'm happy to be here this morning to provide a liaison report. It was great to see you all at WQCC a couple of months ago, and so a lot's been going on since then. Just to share a little bit of my activities, last month I had the privilege of attending a high-level policy delegation trip to Denmark. So I was there in early November to basically share what just kind of what we do here in California, but then also to learn from them, to learn they rely solely on groundwater, and then so got to talk to their Minister of Environment, Denmark EPA, and several of their partners. And then also to tour their drinking water facility and also a couple of their wastewater facilities. And so really learn about their how they manage their groundwater and also their wastewater and drinking water. So that was just a really great trip. Definitely packed days, full 12-plus-hour days, a lot of sharing of information, and just really grateful to have attended that and to bring back the information. So happy to have additional conversations about just the additional information, the information that was learned and shared there. We just wanted to just highlight that trip for you because it was just really educational, especially with their reliance on groundwater and how they manage their systems. So just a couple updates from the state board. On December 5th, we adopted the amendments to the water quality enforcement policy. On the 7th, a couple state board members attended. They traveled to Coachella to commemorate the 100th consolidation through the SAFER program. So that's since 2019. So a lot of work has been done through the SAFER program to date. As you all know, there's still a lot more work to be done. And so we'll continue to move forward there. There's also a couple of workshops this coming Wednesday for the program, looking at the one of those will be looking at next year's our annual update to just the looking at the systems that are on the list, those systems that are failing, at risk. And so that workshop is next week. There's a workshop in the morning, and there's also a workshop in the afternoon. Yes.
Please repeat that one more time.
And so there's 2 SAFER workshops, and I can send the information. That public notice just went out, and I can send the links. Make sure you guys get the links to the exact times of those workshops. Apologize, I don't quite remember them offhand at this moment. I want to say they're at 10 and 1, but want to make sure I give you the correct information. And so that is, where we do the needs assessment and do the rollout of what the proposed updates to that needs assessment, the failing and at-risk systems. And so that workshop is definitely next week. I noted it on my calendar. I wanted to make sure that I highlighted that for you all today. And I will definitely make sure you get all of the information. So the Sacramento San Joaquin Bay Delta Water Quality Control Plan, as part of the public process required to implement the San Francisco Bay, Sacramento, San Joaquin Bay Delta Water Quality Control Plan, the state board released a draft report on September 28th that evaluate environmental and related effects to in-stream flows and other potential changes. And so a multi-day series of hearings were held. We just concluded those this past Monday. And so we had 2 that were during the day, November 17th and December 1st. This past Monday started at 12 noon with the intention of going into until past work hours to allow those that were not able to attend during the day to come later on. So we went to 7 p.m. on Monday. And so the comment period has been extended from December 15th. And so from this week to Friday, January 19th, to provide additional time for the public to comment on the draft plan. And I should say, actually, the draft environmental document there. So proposed adoption for direct potable reuse. And so this is a big item here. So AB 574 required the state water board to adopt uniform water recycling criteria for direct potable reuse, also known as DPR, through raw water augmentation on and before December 31st. And so that is coming in front of the state water board for our consideration next Tuesday, December 19th. Also on December 19th, the state board will consider adoption of proposed amendments to the cross-connection control policy handbook. So I also wanted to highlight a couple of items from California's water supply strategy. The Governor Newsom released the supply strategy in August of 2022. Got to remember what year we're in because we're almost in 2024, and I'm also trying to already practice it so I can get it correct here. So the water supply strategy outlines California's strategy and priority actions to adapt and protect water supplies based on new data and accelerated climate change to ensure California has the new water needed for generations to come. This strategy outlines 4 sets of actions the state will pursue, sets targets, and identifies specific implementation steps to prepare California for its new climate reality. So a couple of items I just wanted to highlight for you is that staff has developed a draft list of planned recycled water projects that hold the potential to be operational by 2030 and no later than 2040. The draft list includes key project information and projections for increases in recycled water by 2030 and by 2040. The draft list was developed through multiple data sources and outreach to individual facilities and industry groups to verify project status and recycled water increased productions. Staff shared the draft list at a November 13th strike team meeting and is finalizing this list to prepare for transmittal to the governor's office by January 1st, 2024. Another item that I wanted just to share was that Water Code Section 1242.1, authorized in July 2023, clarifies how water diverted from flood management can be used to recharge aquifers without a permit and direct the board to post the related information on its website. So the website is up and running now. And as of November 13th, no parties are using the new provisions. However, board staff did give a presentation as part of the recent California Department of Fish and Wildlife workshop. So those provisions are up and going. And so if we get more rain, those will be available to be used. And so one thing that I should have mentioned at the beginning is that the state board has changed our start time from 9:30 to 9 a.m. So state board meetings will also now start at 9 a.m. Moving forward. So I am here if there's any questions. I know that was a lot and I kind of talked fast.
Great presentation. I appreciate the update. Just a curious question regarding your Denmark trip. I remember when we did a WQCC conference a couple of years ago. Were there people here from the Netherlands or was it Denmark?
It was Denmark. It was the Denmark delegation was here. Yes.
Okay. Okay. Just curious. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicole.
And thank you all.
Yeah. Now it's time for a public forum. If you're in person at the meeting and wish to speak but have not submitted a speaker card, please fill out the blue card at the table in front of the boardroom. If you are on the Zoom platform and have not already emailed us but would like to speak during the public forum, please raise your hand now. And then Mindy, has anyone submitted a request to speak on any topic which is not on the agenda today?
Pam Giacomini, a rancher, would like to, I believe she's on Zoom and would like to address the board.
Okay.
You may
Great.
unmute
Hello.
yourself.
Good morning. Thank you very much for having me.
Good morning.
I first want to thank you for attending our tour that we had in October. Hopefully it was very informative for you all, and we really appreciated your participation. So the second thing I'd like to address is the Irrigated Lands Regulatory Program. As you know, we've done a ton of work. My team has done a ton of work up here in the Upper Pitt watershed, and we plan to bring, prior to your February meeting, a proposal to exempt irrigated pasture and hay. And we want to keep that focused on those two commodities, period. So anyway, we will make sure that we get our package to you probably 40 days prior to your February meeting, which would be the first part of January, I'm assuming. And then your staff will have a chance to review that and then be able to put it out for a 30-day comment period. Are there any questions? Okay, thanks so much.
Thank you, Pam. Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Next, we have Bruce Haddishelt. He's here in person, would like to speak.
But okay, I'm here in person. Want you to start off. Bruce Haddishelt, Northern California Water Association, representing the Sac Valley Water Quality Coalition, which goes from the Delta to the Oregon border. Take a second. Where were you in December 2003? All right. You've reflected on that. I know where I was. At that meeting 20 years ago, the initial Irrigated Lands Regulatory Program was crafted. It was a product of 1999 legislation and litigation that advanced the belief that ag chemicals were washing off fields into creeks, streams, and rivers, killing aquatic ecosystems and the fish that depended on it. An advocacy group, the Sports Fishermen Protection Alliance, advanced edge of field monitoring. In Patrick's chair was the late Tom Pecos, and along the way, names like Joe Karkowski, Pamela Creedon, the late Clay Rogers, Susan Fergain, Karen Mogus, and at least, Adam Lappitz, and at least, 4 liaisons to the Sac Valley have been involved in reshaping the original order to reflect each of the 3 distinct hydrologic regions of the Central Valley. As board member Morgan just mentioned, commemoration, and I think this is important as you begin your 2-day meetings to commemorate the history and the successes of the Irrigated Lands Program. At the center of that were some very challenging conversations that required everyone to set aside their institutional perspectives and become objective, and staff to become arbitrators of stakeholder conversations that required everyone, and I mean everyone, ag and regulators alike, to venture outside their comfort zone and to trust through verification. Think about the TSA line, right? You can go through the normal line, the bar is set high, but if you provide more documentation and the risk level goes down, you get to take your shoes off, right? Oh, you get to keep your shoes on, I'm sorry. And you get to go to the head of the line. In this Irrigated Lands Program, the documentation has taken the form of pilot programs with ag commissioners to do outreach and education that's resulted in success stories in Walker Creek on chlorpyrifos. It's been pilot programs in Pope Valley and El Dorado on reduced monitoring. There have been expert panels on nitrogen applications led by Poly's Dr. Burt, petitions on orders that led to the 2018 state presidential order, another expert panel on representative surface water quality monitoring that validated the representative monitoring approach was appropriate. Importantly, there have been tens of millions of dollars spent by farmers on monitoring, modeling, reporting of management practices to demonstrate that our practices are protective of surface and groundwater quality for aquatic life, for drinking water and the many beneficial uses that you are charged with protecting. Against that backdrop is the harsh reality of the economics on the farm. Whether it's 90% of the rice acreage not being planted in 2022 in Colusa County, whether it's the walnut prices crashing, whether it's vineyards this year that are left with lots of grapes hanging on them because the market is, as one grower said to me, it's an ugly market, not a bad market, an ugly market. Winter wheat's looking for a little quench of thirst right now. And in my county of Placer, 15, the Mandarin farms are shutting down because there's only about 15% of the crop. And so it's going to be tough to get mandarins. This is a harsh economic reality that not just impacts the family farm, but the allied industries that support those family farms, and equally as important, the local economies. So despite the reservations of stakeholders and staff, we in the Sac Valley see the value of providing the documentation to get the head of the TSA line, right, and keep our shoes on. At NACWA, we believe in the fix, not the fight. Nature-based solutions that we advocate for to benefit fish and birds could not be possible in polluted waters in the Sacramento Valley. Gone are the days when farmers could willy-nilly throw around nitrogen pesticides. They recognize the cost-benefit analysis just doesn't work anymore, and they've been educated by various commodity groups. So in the Sac Valley, working with our ag commissioners, crop advisors, distinguished university experts in hydrogeology and cropping systems, the Sac Valley has, where do I go from here? Sac Valley has provided the verification so that you as a board and your staff can trust the outcome. I want to thank you and board members who've preceded you for the past 20 years, who've taken the time to walk the ground, as Ms. Giacomini said, walk the ground with the farmers and see their practices that have existed even before the regulation that protect the land and the water. As I mentioned, trust is important, trust with verification. And the further we get away from October and a really productive field visit, the further, the more that trust is eroded. We had to, as you heard that day and in other conversations, agriculture sometimes views regulatory agencies as bounty hunters. They're going to come find a violation and I'm going to end up with a fine. We've worked really hard with you to ensure that that doesn't happen. So as I leave you, I want to thank you. And we've had a lot of success stories in the Sacramento Valley to craft our waste discharge requirements to reflect our landscape and our protection of water, whether it's the reduced monitoring management practice verifications that exist in El Dorado, Napa, Lake, Nequa, used to be in the Upper Feather River, whether it's the Goose Lake exemption, whether it's the Upper Feather River exemption. And as Ms. Giacomini said, whether it's the Pitt River exemption that we're working on right now. We appreciate the journey. It's been longer than anyone wants, but it's important to document so that all the stakeholders can trust and work collaboratively towards solutions. So I want to thank you and wish you a great holiday. I look forward to the priorities presentation.
Thanks, Bruce. It was a good history lesson. I wasn't here 20 years ago, but appreciate that.
And I certainly appreciate the comments. I will say that, in terms of a timeline for getting a proposal and analyzing a proposal and going through monitoring reports and understanding what, modification to waste discharge requirements, attaining that by the February board meeting, even under the time schedule, would be extraordinarily difficult, even if everything lined up. I know our board staff would have to take the proposal in and take a good look at it. We are going to make the commitment to continue to work on these issues and to continue to work with this watershed in particular to understand where we can cut back where it's appropriate. And I think that's I've had a lot of conversations with Sue, her team. I'm sorry. Is that? Oh, that was Jean. Okay. We do have the commitment to continue to work with that watershed and understand what the next steps are.
And I just wanted to follow up on that a little bit. And I know, and thank you all for coming to that tour in October to see the work that our staff's working with the growers up there. And there's a lot of history here. And as Bruce was saying, this area is under what we call the reduced monitoring and management practices, because we have recognized that they're a different area than maybe the valley floor in many respects. I think the reality of what we know right now is that we need more information, and certainly our staff are, the door is open to conversation. The door is open to, collecting and gathering that information. But the truth is that this area is different than the Upper Feather River watershed, and it is different than Goose Lake. We know that much. And so, I've had conversations with Pam, and I know that there's a lot of concerns in the area, and we're going to work with them on this. But at the end of the day, Bruce kind of mentioned trust. We've always been honorable and upfront with those groups, and certainly we will continue to be so and work with them on these issues.
Thanks, Adam and Patrick. Yeah, and the tour up there was really eye-opening, and it's beautiful country, obviously, but to understand kind of the mechanics of what they're trying to do in growing pastures and hay up there, which is a low margin crop in a good year. So that, that was it was a little bit of a reality check on how they have to deal with all of the regulations that they're faced with. But I think, continuing that discussion and taking a look at additional data, if it can be obtained, would be helpful. And I would agree with Patrick. I was thinking February is awfully close right now. So hopefully we can get to it eventually next year. Did you want to? Yeah, Sean.
Yeah, sorry. I just want to circle back to the board member communication. I too also attended WQCC meeting on October 23rd and 24th. It was intriguing, educational, and exciting to hear from the state leaders, region leaders, and other stakeholders. So it was a treat. Thank you.
Thanks, Sean. Excuse me. Okay, moving on to agenda item 5, the executive officer's report. Prior to each meeting, the executive officer works with the executive assistant and the board's program managers to compile a report on the status of the board's programs, its staffing, and many different initiatives the board is working on. This time, the executive officer's report also includes a list of the board's priorities for 2024-25. If you are a person in the room and wish to speak but have not submitted the speaker card, again, please fill out a blue card at the table in front of the boardroom entrance. If you're on the Zoom platform and wish to speak and have not emailed us, please raise your hand now. And at this time, I think Patrick's going to take the floor.
All right. And you can hold off on the presentation for just 1 minute, Jean. All right. First, I want to make sure that I'm fielding any questions from the executive officer report, and then I've got my favorite part of the board meeting, hand out a couple awards to well-deserving staff. But first, open the floor up to see if there's any comments on the executive officer report for this past board meeting. Lots happening.
I'll just simply say that since I've been on the board, and the executive officer report was a very thick document with lots of information, valuable information. But I appreciate over the period of time, and particularly in the last couple of years, how it's been streamlined to lay it out in a format to where it's a lot more readable, The programming is in its place, you know, so if you want information, instead of having to go through all those pages, programming, enforcement, success stories, it's all there. And the information that I had spoken about some time ago was to have information about outreach to disadvantaged communities. I see that being valuable information as well. And I just think you've heard what the board has said, and I think it's a lot more readable for our board members as well as the public. The staff does a great job and a tremendous amount of work that's being done, and to put it in an executive officer's report. So every time we come to a meeting, we know what has been worked on and is presented to us and the public in a fashion that's readable and shows accomplishments. And so I'm quite pleased with it. I'm pleased with the work and of the staff and the work of the executive officers. So thank you very much.
All right. Well, thank you so much. I will say it's a team effort, and the undisputed team captain is Mindy, who helps marshal all the program managers and gets everything compiled, and then, you know, goes through my review each and every board meeting. But it's an effort to really make the document a little more understandable, not just to the board members, but to the public as well. And to legislators who may have some questions about what we're doing, we can point them to the executive's officer's report, and it has a good compendium of what we've been up to.
Morning, Patrick.
Morning.
I want to second Denise' comment on that. I think the executive officer's report is very thorough. I really like the outreach that was summarized on the report. And I also wanted to say that I love the fact that we have links on some of the items that if you click on, then you have more information to read. That's very helpful. So good job all around. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
And I kind of focused on the priority projects for next year when I was
Yeah.
reviewing the executive officer report. So I'm looking forward to that
Yeah,
presentation.
we'll get into it in just a minute.
Yeah.
But without further ado, I think I see both Denise and Rebecca in the audience. I'll start with Denise. And this is a Superior Accomplishment Award for outstanding service. And I'll just go right into it. Christine Croyle is the manager who proposed Denise for this award, and I thoroughly endorsed it. The Central Valley Water Board purchased 6 pedal kayaks, 2 for each of our 3 offices, to ensure staff that could collect samples and investigate freshwater harmful algal bloom events. And you know, it sounds interesting, but it's really, really important sometimes to get water quality samples not at the side bank of the river, but more out into the open. And so that's what these kayaks were for. This was the first purchase of kayaks for a state water resource control board, and we were informed by the Division of Administrative Services Health and Safety Office that staff must be trained on the use of pedal kayaks prior to their use in the field. Central Valley Water Board Program Support Unit staff Denise Hill took the initiative to figure out how to get staff trained to use our new pedal kayaks. The process to set up the kayak trainings proved to be challenging and complicated. Denise used her training expertise to navigate complex health and safety policies and procedures. She also had to find a vendor that was willing or able to train staff on how to use and transport pedal kayaks, which proved to have much more limited training options than traditional paddle kayaks. Denise coordinated and met with the DAS Health and Safety Office, identified and met with potential training vendors, and consulted with technical staff, program management on their needs. Denise worked alongside the training office to select training vendor that could meet the needs of the Central Valley Water Board, worked with the training vendor to problem solve on how to hold a training for 8 staff a day with only 2 pedal kayaks, worked with program managers to identify staff that needed training, and ensured all training request forms, staff payments were submitted timely. Denise was successful in setting up 2 kayak training sessions held on September 25th and 26th for 16 Central Valley Water Board staff across 3 of our offices. Overall, this was a highly complicated process that took a large amount of staff time over many months. Denise's efforts have paved the way for kayak training for the rest of the water board's regions, divisions, and offices. And this is, it's an interesting little anecdote, right? But you often hear stories that might appear in the Sacramento Bee about unused inventory. Bureau Reclamation bought a thing and they never used it. I think it's often because you have, the stereotype of a government worker, non-creative. If it's out of the box, it's not getting done. Denise is the exact opposite. Especially with this program, she's done a lot of work for the regional board for all the training that we've been doing through the pandemic. So certainly the paddle kayaks is a highlight of what she's proposed to us, but I know her work going back many years, just an exemplary performer for the Central Valley. And Denise, very, very deserving of this award. Feel free to come on up. Thanks so much. Thank you. We'll get a picture as soon as we get Rebecca up here as well. So hang out for just 1 second.
Okay.
Rebecca, hit. Rebecca, up from the Fresno office. Omar Mustafa has proposed the Superior Accomplishment Award. Rebecca is often kind of the lone voice from the forest management program in the Fresno office, but has been doing incredible work across a wide variety of programs. Always happy to help, but I'll get into the actual text of the award. But I really wanted to second Omar's proposal for Rebecca's recognition here. I am pleased to nominate Rebecca Hipp for the Superior Accomplishment Award for the exemplary work she has done in the Forest Activities Program for the Region 5 Fresno office. Since joining the regional board as an environmental scientist in February of 2020, Rebecca has been the primary contact in the Fresno office for the Forest Activities Program and is responsible for reviewing notice of intent for timber harvest projects seeking coverage under the board's waste discharge requirements general order for discharges related to timberland management activities, the general order, drafting notices of applicability for those projects to be enrolled in the general order, and reviewing and processing notices of termination for completed timber projects that no longer need coverage under the general order. Rebecca is also responsible for conducting compliance inspections of timber harvest projects to ensure that project activities are being conducted in a manner protective of water quality and reviewing monitoring reports submitted for projects enrolled under the general order. During the 2022-2023 fiscal year, Rebecca conducted a total of 26 inspections related to the Forest Activities Program, surpassing the inspection target of 21 inspections for the entire Fresno office. Rebecca's commitment to fulfilling her job duties has continued to the 2023-2024 fiscal year, as she has completed 14 inspections as of October 2023 and is on track to once again surpass the Forest Activities Program inspection target for the Fresno office. In addition, Rebecca regularly participates in meetings with the state and regional board staff to discuss various project and permit documents for the Forest Activities Program, and she has also helped review draft Forest Activities Program permit documents scheduled to be considered by the board at future board meetings. Rebecca does an excellent job of fulfilling her role as a primary contact in the Fresno office for the Forest Activities Program and regularly exceeds expectations due to her strong work ethic, positive attitude, writing skills, and interpersonal skills. For these reasons and more, Rebecca is very deserving of the Superior Accomplishment Award. And again, like I said, it's always a pleasure to see Rebecca's face pop up on the screen when we're having a meeting. Always brings something excellent to the table. So congratulations.
Thank you so much.
And hers isn't framed because we weren't sure if we were going to send it down to Fresno or not, and didn't want it to get broken in the mail. But we'll make sure we take care of you on that. And let's take a couple pictures, if you could, for the board. And Jean, you can bring up the presentation if you could. All right. And as the picture indicates, it's been an extraordinary year for the Central Valley Water Board. This was flooding that occurred in the Tulare Lake Basin, as Denise is well aware, this past year. It shows that to a certain extent, I put this picture up here that because the portfolio management process, much as we try to make progress on priority projects, the portfolio management process, first and foremost, is a means of not only prioritizing, but reprioritizing when events like the floods of Tulare Lake came up. So we had to certainly reposition staff, reallocate staff to do certain tasks to make sure that water quality was protected. And that's really what this indication is there. And Denise, I know you've lived it and are still living it. There's still water in that basin, and there probably will be through the summer of next year. But our staff is trying to do the best we can to respond to events like that. And a refresher, I'll always include this slide just in terms of what the cyclical process is for the priority project setting and for the annual work plans. We're here in December in that first box, setting the priority projects for 24-25. In January through June, we will be developing the annual work plan. So each one of the program managers will specify what they want their staff working on through the course of the next fiscal year. Next fiscal year, beginning July 1, will be implementation. And then in August, we'll report back to the board on the implementation of prior year's work plan. Essentially, what worked, what didn't work, what did we have to reprioritize midway through the process to make sure that we covered all our bases. And racial equity resolution. So this time last year, we were actually considering both priority projects and a racial equity resolution. What we've done this year is continued that racial equity resolution goals, incorporated into the annual work plans. And I will be providing an update to the board in August about the achievement of our racial equity goals from this past fiscal year. So we're kind of midway through 23-24. Some of the people that presented the racial equity resolution to you, two of them accepted promotion. So I unfortunately, they're no longer with the team, but that made room for a few other folks. I don't know, racial equity seems to be a fast track for approaching a lot of water quality issues in the state in general. But some members of the team broke off and formed a number of additional groups that I'm working with. Chief among them is the accountability group. The accountability group meets regularly with the program managers. We just had a series of meetings over the past couple of weeks as a check-in. How are you doing meeting your racial equity goals for this past year? So even though we're not adopting a new racial equity resolution this year, we're continuing the work that was set forward by that racial equity resolution. And you'll see that reflected in the priority projects that we are discussing here today. And I will say, throughout all of this, the touchstone is the words up on the screen, working towards a future where race no longer predicts access or quality of water resources. Race is not a predictor of professional outcomes for our employees. And the boards apply a racial equity lens to the decision-making process, which means that as we're moving forward in the cleanup program, in the permitting program, in the planning program, we make sure that we interact with and have meaningful conversations with tribal groups and disadvantaged communities to structure our programs and learn from them as we set our targets. And I'll always include this one as well, not just because it's got Mark's smiling face on there, but because this is the spot on the website where you can go to see what the program goals are for the upcoming year. Just click on Programs Overview, and you'll see not just this, but the resources that are allocated to the board's various water quality programs. And so without further ado, I'll launch into the priority projects that we're working on this year. For the NPDES programs, the NPDES is the Point Source Discharge Program, the federal program that we implement. There you see the SAC Regional's shiny new wastewater treatment plant with the nitrate reduction basins right there. Priority projects this year for the NPDES program will be continue to enhance outreach with tribal groups and disadvantaged communities potentially affected by the NPDES permitting program's proposed permits. So really, we've got the bare minimum in terms of our outreach, but the NPDES program is trying to do more. They're working a lot with Adriana, who's our tribal coordinator out of the Fresno office, to make sure that we have increased outreach to tribal groups that maybe have some interest in the NPDES program and the permits that we adopt. And also, as a priority project, to develop tools to increase permitting efficiency. These are highly technical permits, and the more we can develop tools on our end to expedite those permits, the faster track we are on to meeting our performance targets for the year. Waste discharge to land program. This is the oldest of the water quality programs that we have in our portfolio. It regulates this predates the Clean Water Act by a bit. These regulate the facilities that discharge to land. Priority projects in this program are, first and foremost to continue to implement the new law AB 2108, which requires us, when we're adopting general orders, which the Waste Discharge to Land program is working on a few, and when we're adopting orders that have a time schedule for compliance built in, to engage in culturally relevant outreach to affected communities, to put racial equity and environmental justice findings in our permit about what we see as potential issues, and really to have engagement on any of those time schedules that you see in those permits. And for the land discharge waste discharge to land program, it's usually nitrates. Nitrates are the issue that we have to have time schedules for and work towards long-term compliance. That dovetails right into the implement the nitrate control program under CV salts. Denise, Mark, that was the conversation that we had just a couple weeks ago. We will continue to have that conversation about the implementation of the nitrate control program, and the waste discharge to land program will be bearing a heavy load in terms of implementation of that program. And last but not least, we've got 3 general orders on deck, all at kind of different stages of completion. I think the mid-sized wastewater treatment plants, it should read, will be next on deck. Hopefully we'll get that adopted early in 24-25. So we're looking on finalizing the outreach in the upcoming months, and then letting that order out there for public review. Water quality certifications. Now, I know everybody attended or tuned into WQCC. There was a lot of conversations about the water quality certifications program. There's a lot of changes. That last bullet is after the Sackett decision at the U.S. Supreme Court. The duties for this program in particular are going to be changing. And it means that we'll be taking over a little bit of a load from the federal government and working on water quality permits that the feds would used to have worked on. We still don't know how big that universe is. I think it's relatively reasonable and should be able to be handled. But that's a new workload and a new priority project for the water quality certifications program. And to support that work, the program plans on streamlining workflow and really streamlining workflow in the same way that we tried to streamline the executive officer's report. We're putting pressure on you streamline the workflow, you clearly communicate to dischargers and permit applicants what we're doing, when we're doing, what the process is. And that also pays dividends in terms of public process. We have easy graphics to kind of show to people in the communities. And it's often tribal communities that have some interest in the water quality certifications program. Here's what we're doing. Here's where your opportunity to comment is. Here's the scope of this proposal. Here's what it's doing. Here's what it's not doing. And so, making it clear to dischargers also has the added benefit of making it clear to people who want to participate in that process. We also are going to be trying to expedite habitat restoration projects. As all of you may or may not know, as part of some of the agreements between water utilities, water users, water agencies in the state of California, they were called the voluntary agreements. I think they're shifting the terminology around a little bit. We're not party to those particular agreements. That's a water rights thing. But we do have a lot of habitat restoration projects that will need to be permitted in the Central Valley to facilitate those projects. And we're talking about thousands of acres of restoration projects throughout the Central Valley that need to be evaluated. The water quality certifications, mitigation offsets need to be evaluated. So there's a lot of work kind of coming on down the line, particularly in the Central Valley, to implement those projects. And so there's a lot of interest, in just about everybody who uses water in the state of California to make sure that those projects move forward. And last but not least, as you may know, there was a lot of interest in utility corridors, particularly when you had the Camp Fire, Dixie Fire, some of the other major fires within our region that were potentially set, in some cases very explicitly set by utility companies that had failed to maintain their utility corridors. PG&E was a culprit in some of those and found liable for some of the fire damage. The state said, well, you got to make sure that you maintain those utility corridors a lot more. And guess what? When you maintain those utility corridors, oftentimes it means you're felling vegetation, you're crossing stream channels, and that means you interface with the water quality certifications program. So all the work that you do to make sure that utility corridor is clear and that there's not going to be branches knocking over utility lines and sparking fires, and you maintain those utility lines, interacts with the board, because we need to understand what you're doing and that what you're doing isn't going to impact water quality. And so sediment, pesticides, all of that is rolled up in these water quality certifications for the utility general order. The stormwater program. So the stormwater program is interesting, and I've talked about it a little bit. First, the renewal of the region-wide MS4 general permit is going to be a big deal for this upcoming fiscal year. That's MS4 stands for Municipal Separate Storm Sewer System. So those are the storm gutters that you see in just about all the communities of Central Valley. We've got a general order that needs updating. It imposes requirements like low impact development. And so there's a lot of conversations that have to happen between that program and, frankly, the communities and the developers in the Central Valley, because there's a huge push for housing as well. And we don't want to stand in the way of that, but we want to make sure that we also protect water quality. So a really big issue for us. It turns into a lot of tough conversations there, but I think we can achieve both goals with our revised MS4 general permit. And last but not least, this is certainly something that is very relevant for racial equity issues, is targeted inspections of industrial stormwater sites. We partner with all the other regional boards and the state board to look at industrial stormwater sites, to evaluate the communities and where those industrial stormwater sites are located under EnviroScreen, and try to use that as a prioritization tool. What we found, and this is not a shock to anybody, but most of the industrial sites are clustered in areas in disadvantaged communities, and very often BIPOC communities, and very often, poorer communities. And so adding muscle to the industrial stormwater program, making sure that those sites are not polluting waters, is in and of itself a targeted racial equity issue. And if we clean up those sites, we are having a huge impact on those communities and on the waterways that those communities depend on. And again, it's no surprise to anybody. It's almost self-obvious. But if you run the numbers, you very clearly find that these sites are clustered in disadvantaged communities. All right, I'll pause there for a second. For the planning program, continued development of tribal beneficial use designations is a huge undertaking. Tribal lands, all of California was tribal land to start with. So having conversations with tribal groups about their use of waterways, their use of the watersheds, what they value in terms of their water quality protection is critical to the planning program. So there's a huge effort underway to advance those tribal beneficial uses. You'll see this come up, for priority projects. It shows up in priority projects. It also shows up in the triennial review. as a priority project to continue to make headway on tribal beneficial use designations. I saw Lauren in the office just a few days ago, and she remarked that we're actually rounding the home stretch. As you recall, we adopted the tribal beneficial uses into our basin plan, at least the definitions, setting the stage for the next actions that we're going to take. They're rounding the corner. I think they're being finalized through Office of Administrative Law. And so we're very nearing the end of the process of getting the tribal beneficial use designations into our basin plan. So that's something to be celebrated. And then, of course, the next step is to get those designations and implementation plans, et cetera, implemented in some of the watersheds that most need it. CV salts, as always, these are going to be priority projects. So first and foremost, Angela and Adam have worked a lot on a nitrate control program transition plan. This is not necessarily a complete handoff, but the nitrate control program is shifting from the planning program into implementation. So we're going to turn what's in the management zone implementation plans into permit terms. That means that the irrigated lands regulatory program, the confined animals, the dairy program, and the waste discharge to land program, where they have a tall order ahead of them. You got to make what is promised in the management zone implementation plans into permit terms that are enforceable. The timelines have to be enforceable. We have to work through CEQA issues associated with adopting those permits. So the transition plan is key, and I've got the document that I'm currently reviewing. That's going to be one of the priority projects for the upcoming year. And then the other two, no surprise, continue to support both the nitrate control program and salt control program as they continue to be implemented. A big deal, just for everybody's information. Those of you who have participated in the executive calls of the CV Salts team, we're going to be releasing the Priority 2 notices to comply in the very near future, by the end of the month. That was our obligation, was to get it done in 2023. Angela, even though we switched program managers, Angela's getting it out on the 29th, I think, is the proposed mail out day. If you want to come in and help address envelopes, I think next Tuesday is the day, if I'm right, Adam. All the board members are invited. You can kind of if you want to get those out the door, but those will be going out the door, and we will begin implementation of the nitrate control program in the priority 2 basins in the very near future. So a lot of conversations. We, just like with the first mail out, we expect an onslaught of phone calls. What the heck is this thing? Wait a second, I'm out of compliance. And so those conversations will begin right at the start of the new year. The Surface Water Ambient Monitoring Program is a small program here at the regional board. It's kind of, sometimes when you talk with the public, it's what they assume we're doing all the time. Have an army of scientists going out there and monitoring all the waterways in the Central Valley. Would be great if I had those resources, but rather it's a couple members of our team, spread throughout all of our offices that work on a coordinated monitoring effort with the State Water Board. And one of the things that they do that's incredibly relevant to people who oftentimes don't have a great community pool that they can go to is they recreate in the waterways. They go out and they go swimming in whether it's the Merced or the Kern or the American River here in Sacramento. And for the lower American River, for the American River in general, we've developed a GIS reporting tool. I know we've sent it around a couple times, where you can click on the map and it shows you where the E. coli levels are high, where we've done some sampling for E. coli in the river. And that's really relevant to people who want to plan their picnic by the river. And if you look at that map, you can actually very easily understand, hey, maybe if we go a few blocks up, we're at lower risk for E. coli in this water body. And it's largely driven by geese. I think that's kind of the message that a lot of surveys are showing, but there's ways to mitigate your risk if you're going out into these waterways. And the SWAMP program put a very ambitious series of racial equity goals together. It's a little harder to implement than was initially planned, but we're still making some headway. for translating those websites, translating those GIS systems, making some informational videos about how to use those websites and getting them up. We're working with the Office of Public Participation. We're working with the statewide swamp effort to continue those efforts. So we're going to assess those waterways and really try and broaden the availability of that tool. They've worked on making sure that it's available on your cell phone, because that's how most people interact with this stuff these days. But the next step is to make sure that you got some YouTube or maybe TikTok videos. Adam, are you volunteering for that one? I'll propose a dance to make sure that we can get that information out there. But really make sure that it's accessible to people who are using the waterways and need to access that tool. Priority projects for the non-point source program. Non-point source program is a program that kind of leverages not a huge amount of federal funds, but an important kind of augmentation to implement projects that are in the non-point source 5-year plan. This year, this 5-year increment, it includes CV salts, wildfire response, harmful algal blooms, agriculture, and water quality impacts from homelessness. We're going to begin the development of the next 5-year plan, which will include, again, the racial equity goals. And I think we have strong support at the State Water Board to incorporate that as we continue to develop the next 5-year plan. That's a joint effort. So all of the regional boards will be working on that collaboratively. For the TMDL program, front and center, and Sean, I know I've talked with you a little bit about that. We're going to be undertaking a scientific peer review of the Delta Mercury Control Program and associated delta methyl mercury TMDL. This is a really big deal for the board, and it's a really big deal for subsistence fishers in the Delta. What you see there, that's the stripers. Those are really, really fun to fish, taste great. They also bioaccumulate mercury at relatively high levels because they are not anadromous fish. They stay relatively local. They're not like salmon that spend a lot of their lives at sea, come back. So they eat lower trophic level fish that eat lower trophic level critters and that kind of food web concentrates methyl mercury. And so it represents a problem for tribes and subsistence fisher groups that want to eat a lot of meals of this fish over the course of a week. So we're looking at the best way we can to reduce those methyl mercury loads into the Delta. A lot of times that involves cleaning up the tributaries, cleaning up abandoned mines that are still bleeding mercury into the system, and also monitoring kind of wastewater treatment plants, stormwater systems to make sure that mercury levels are as low as possible coming off of the systems. All right, I'll pause there for a minute. It's a lot of information, I know.
Has there been any success in reducing some of the mercury levels as you've just spoken about?
There have been some very, very cool successes in 2 areas. One, mine remediation. There's been a few projects that have been undertaken. For former board member Bob Schneider works with a group called Tuliomi. They recently completed, I think it was like McCord Environmental. I know Stephen McCord did some work on remediating some mercury that was slewing off of the Elgin mine in the Cache Creek watershed. I forget what county that is. I want to say Napa or Sonoma. I'm not 100% sure on that one. It's in the Cache Creek watershed. So there's been some mine remediation work that's happened over the past several years that should cut off sources of mercury to the Delta. You're not going to see an immediate impact there, but over the long term, getting those mines cleared up and getting the elemental mercury from washing into the system is a big deal. The other thing that is really, really important is the studies that are better understanding what the methyl mercury contributions are. So phase 1 of the methyl mercury control program, we set some load and waste load allocations, but we also put very strenuous monitoring requirements to studies, everybody from the water contractors to POTWs. And I think Fish and Wildlife had a hand in reviewing some of those studies. Really understanding what the methyl mercury loads were. And we're talking about just really unbelievably small amounts of methylmercury is really can be harmful. And those studies kind of showed that one of the big benefits of switching to tertiary treatment, especially with we're working on getting all of the Delta plants upgraded to tertiary treatment. I think we're almost there. There's one straggler, which is an astounding success story in and of itself. Also knocks out the mercury contributions from those wastewater treatment plants. So most of the wastewater treatment plants, almost all of the wastewater treatment plants, are in compliance with what we set out to accomplish in the methylmercury control program. A little more stubborn problem is what's happening with the MS4s. Again, you're talking about really in unbelievably small amounts of loading. So we'll be having conversations about how to address that loading. And then there's the contributions from the tributaries. So the big water systems flowing in, that's where, the biggest bang for the buck is remediating those mines. And also, Cache Creek Settling Basin kind of shows up every once in a while as something that if we can have an ongoing operations and maintenance plan, that's where you have elemental mercury washing in from the Coast Range, settling out in that basin. Regular maintenance of that helps the long-term mercury picture for the Delta. That's mostly off the top of my head. I think I got most of that right, but that's really where where the successes were in understanding methylmercury a lot better, and in remediating those mine systems and the tertiary treatment for the plants, which was really adopted for other reasons, but the added benefit of mercury reductions is a huge benefit to the program.
And Patrick, just to comment on the American River discussion.
Yeah.
For those who don't live here in Sacramento, there was a little political firestorm about homeless encampments in general, but I think it was just last week, the district attorney did a media tour of the lower American River, trying to make the point that the homeless situation was contributing to harm to the waterway. Yeah. And there was a brief mention, I believe, in the article I read anyway, about the geese contribution. It got a lot of attention, and I think that extends way beyond Sacramento. That issue is going to kind of influence activities up and down the Central Valley.
Certainly, and we, just to be totally transparent, we've had conversations with the media, we've had conversations with, the city, and we've had conversations with the district attorney's office about this whole bunch of issues that they're working on. Homelessness is a huge problem in California, and to be honest, while it may not be the driver of E. coli issues, we are very concerned from the trash perspective. It's something that and has impacts to the waterways, and there's no easy solution. As long as people are living outside in the cold, you're going to have this trash problem continue to show up. So, it dovetails with the state's effort to kind of expand housing and expand services for folks who have fallen on hard times. California, it's a wonderful place. It can be rough if you're on the fringes, and some folks there are having a tough time, and figuring out where water quality issues end and where other agencies can help out has been a challenge for the state on the whole.
Hey, Pat.
Yeah.
A lot of information so far, but a lot of great information. So I just want to thank you for that so far. I have heard a lot of information concentrating about disadvantaged community and tribal and homeless, that it's under the umbrella of disadvantaged community. And, I myself still live in a Title I school area. So I really appreciate that, that equity lens of try to help out the most vulnerable community, which is, has a domino effect. If they are in trouble, it's going to weigh on everybody's shoulder. Absolutely. So I appreciate that. I'm just curious, do we have assemble any sort of representative group as far as those groups, so that we could brainstorms with them of what's going on in their neck of the woods, and if we haven't, are we planning to do some sort of that nature?
For which group?
Any group. I mean, just the disadvantaged community in general. And, so because I find that, if we help them assemble representative groups, I think it will be easier to collect information from them. Because when you do that, it gives them a sense of responsibility as far as talking to one another
Absolutely.
and collecting their concerns and their proposed solution, from their own neighborhood.
Absolutely. And I know I was trying to get the word out there as much as possible. So the State Water Board and Cal EPA manage a few small community grant programs that do just that. And I am in communication. We have a conversation with the Office of Public Participation that even has proposals to enhance that. And what they can do is they can go into, the process, and I know I've worked with Cal EPA in the past to kind of try and streamline that process so that if somebody wants to go in and get a grant to do organizing within a community, to understand water quality issues better, they can put in their application. There's fewer strings attached to the dollars these days. I hope it doesn't dry up. I know the budget condition is rough this upcoming year, but there are resources available from both the federal government and from Cal EPA, and the water boards are trying to increase their portfolio there as well. And what we've been able to do is route some money to groups to have public participation campaigns to frankly say, this is so you don't like a permit. What do you do? How do you interact with the board? How do you learn? I remember there was a number of years ago, one of the recipients from our program, Denise, I think you remember when Little Manila Rising came and they actually read some poetry before the board and really had a pretty big impact on kind of the board's decision making and really kind of helped focus the board's attention on some areas. And I believe they were a recipient of one of those grants to help the community understand how to participate in a board process. What you can do, what can't you do, how do you read a notice, things like that. And so those efforts are ongoing. I think, it's happening a lot in the tribal area, and I know Office of Public Participation is really dedicated to getting those funds out there for community development. Basically, help. We sometimes, and I challenge my staff not to do this, but talk in regulatory speak. TMDLs or NPDES permits, and you ask somebody, in the community, what the heck does that mean? And it's a barrier. It's a barrier to communication. So helping folks navigate those barriers and being self-critical when we use too much of that kind of terminology is something that's ongoing. And I believe it's also part of the racial equity work plan at the State Water Board. Remember, they're in charge of all the monies. But as part of their racial equity work plan that they're working on developing, that's one of the pieces, and it's an important piece as far as I'm concerned. All right, keep going. Administrative support program. So this is Kelly's team, and this is exactly to kind of what some of the comments are. So we are going to continue to coordinate with the State Water Board on the development of resources and guides to assist hiring managers in support of the racial equity work plan. So a lot of it begins, and I won't say ends, but a lot of it begins with making sure that our workforce reflects the communities that we work in. And to do that, we want to increase outreach to folks who may, not have a kind of interest in working for the board, and explain what we do. Explain what our actions are. The programs that are available. And we've had a lot of success. A lot of our offices are diversifying in terms of the people that are hired, and I think that has a knock-on effect. It really. Bringing more voices into the conversation helps us make better decisions at the staff level, at the management level. And so we're going to continue to work and develop best practices in that regard. And again, kind of not exactly on the racial equity front, but the other priority projects are to review and evaluate internal processes to accommodate growing administrative needs. I'm not shy about criticizing when we get resources, and which you may do every once in a while. It rarely comes with the administrative resources to help the back end staffing. So it's like, oh, great, we got another couple engineers. I'll take them. Where is the administrative support? Because those engineers need that administrative support just to do their job. I often go back to the hospital example. It's if you had a hospital run entirely by surgeons, that would be fantastic, right? No, the bills wouldn't get paid. The conditions wouldn't be sanitary, and you'd be a disaster. You need the administrative team to form the backbone, to get the bills out, to get the training done, to get folks up to speed on all of the HR practices, to hire up a good candidate. So it's one of the reasons that I'm the executive sponsor for the administrative support program. I can go to state board and advocate for more positions there, and I'll continue to do that. And last but not least, office space reduction and optimization. Nice way of saying we're having this office cut down in size. Most of our staff are still telecommuting and will be telecommuting at least, about 3 days out of the week for many staff, more in some offices, a little less in others. And that means that, not all of our cubicles are fully utilized, and the state is looking at saving some dollars here. My office is moving. I'm going to be back at the other side. They're cutting that executive part of the office off and giving it back to the management company to rent out to somebody else. If you saw that team of folks meandering through the office this morning, that you may not have recognized them as board employees, they're not. That's the management company and the architects learning on whether they're going to knock down some walls and put some more walls up to reduce the office space. And all of the offices are under pressure to do this. We just happen to be lucky in that our lease was coming up relatively soon. So that's something that is a huge administrative burden. And give my thanks out. You may have seen Ashlyn Ross, a new employee working underneath Kelly. She's came to us from another state agency and really has hit the ground running to help make that happen. So hoteling was a word I'd never heard of before. Now we're hoteling cubicles. It means that we've set up cubicles. If you don't have a dedicated workspace, you can come in on your days in the office and have ergonomic desks, ergonomic computer monitors, and things like that to make sure that you're working in good condition. So lots being placed on the administrative support program, and they're doing a wonderful job with that. All right. Special permitting programs. All of our programs are special. These are special permitting programs. Irrigated lands regulatory program has some of the most ambitious and toughest priority projects in the upcoming year. Integration of their drinking water well monitoring program with the nitrate control program under CV Salts. Drinking water well monitoring is really one of the main focuses of this program, especially from an enforcement perspective. An outstanding response rate. I think it's well above 97, approaching 99% compliance. Thousands and thousands of wells tested throughout the valley for nitrate. Updating groundwater quality management plans, something that we have to do periodically to make sure that the irrigated lands program is making progress in protecting groundwater resources. Sean will involve you in this again, and certainly, Nick, two of you participate in an outreach event. We're going to continue to do that. Strategic engagement with socially disadvantaged growers. I think Sue McConnell is one of those folks, and you heard from growers earlier today. It's not always just the communities that are having some tough times in California. We have a lot of growers that grow very, very small acreage. The folks that we saw were South Asian growers and Southeast Asian growers and people in the Hmong community, and maybe not speak English as their first language, and sometimes they're in tough economic circumstances. They live hand to mouth most of the time, at least in terms of their financial situation. And so we've developed streamlined reporting for them, and we'll continue to advocate for trying to lessen the burden for their reporting requirements in the year to come. Review of management zone implementation plans, that's CV Salts in the priority 1 areas. And convening a new agricultural expert panel is what the state board asked both us and Region 3 to do. That's a priority project for this upcoming year. Oil fields program. We're going to identify priority outreach sites in disadvantaged communities and BIPOC communities. Since a lot of the oil fields program happens very, very far away from communities. Some of it does not. And so we want to make sure that in areas that could affect communities, that we are informing them of what we do and really where they can kind of talk to us about potential concerns within those communities. We're going to review proposed aquifer exemption applications, UIC permits, and SB4 related groundwater monitoring programs to ensure those activities are protective of water quality. Big challenge for the oil fields program. Land disposal program. We are close to hiring a new program manager for the land disposal program. I got to commend JJ. He's been doing triple duty for a little while. Both the program manager for the land disposal program and the UST program retired recently, so he's working on fulfilling those replacements and doing his regular job. But the land disposal program continued project prioritization, including Cal Enviro scores. So we want to look at the communities that these landfills are located in and make sure that we have to do, if we have to do enhanced outreach, that we're interfacing with those communities, and assess new composting efforts due to a surge in new sites caused by SB 1383. That is the bill that essentially said that most organic material shouldn't be in a landfill. It should be composted. It means there's a lot of composting operations that have popped up all around the state, particularly in the Central Valley. New requirements, making sure that that's protective of groundwater quality, is a big challenge for that program. Confined animals, dairies. Dairy general order revision, including outreach requirements. We've been waiting for this for a little while. I hope it's around the corner. I know State Board has been saying it's around the corner. Been a little over 10 years that they've had the petition. Should be any day now. I've got my fingers crossed that it'll happen relatively soon, that we'll be able to kind of chart a future course for the dairy program. And there'll be a lot of work associated with that, managing a CEQA contract, revising that order, hearings before the board, and most importantly, outreach within the communities that are impacted by those dairy operations. Implementation of CV salts is also incredibly important. And digesters, composting, and alternative manure management is part of the portfolio as well. A lot of the team is actually reviewing dairy digester liner requirements. The state has invested very heavily in digesters. There's a lot of grant programs that the Air Board has funded and CDFA has facilitated over the past years. Have resulted in a lot of digesters. That's a digester in the foreground there of that picture. To build a digester, usually you have to line that pond. And then you have to put a cap on it, and making sure that that liner design is appropriate for the given geology, given wastes that are going into it, is a huge undertaking. And the review by our engineering staff, it takes a lot of time, but this is a good way of helping the methane emissions from those facilities. And so that's why the Air Board has a strong interest in continuing that program. Highly controversial, I will say. There are some groups that are opposing that, but from a water quality perspective, we just want to make sure that those liners are designed appropriately, and to a certain extent, leave the policymaking on the methane to the Air Board, which they're currently looking at that very hard. Mines program. So the priority projects is prioritize mine cleanup or oversight based on threat to water quality and disproportionate environmental burdens, and make progress on key sites. I actually did not include it in this slide presentation because I didn't have time to do it just this morning. But as we were sitting in the board meeting this morning, we finally got a capstone to a years-long effort. The US EPA is making an initial proposal to do a Superfund listing for the Afterthought mine. That's a mine some of you saw on a tour. It is right next to, I believe, Little Cow Creek, bit north of the Shasta office. If you did the board tour, you drove by the Afterthought mine. It has been bleeding acid mine drainage into the creek for many years, an extreme water quality hazard. The tribes are interested in it. We want to get that thing cleaned up. National priorities listing. Doesn't mean that the funding will be available to get it cleaned up, but it is a huge step in the right direction. Focusing US EPA's attention on that site is a fantastic achievement for our board. And I'll send the letter from the letter from US EPA to the board members. Again, a big milestone for the program just this morning as we were sitting in the session. Cannabis program, enrollment, enforcement, and priority watersheds. On the cannabis program, you've seen a lot of attention on the cannabis program, on what it's doing right, what it's doing wrong. From a statewide perspective, the taxes are too high, taxes are too low. I think the cannabis program is really working on using the few staff that it has to do that enrollment enforcement and priority watersheds, making sure that if you're growing cannabis in the Central Valley, that you have the permit that you need to have. And then to continue to create efficiencies, improve workflow, and reduce backlog. This group also, and I'll kind of send it along, has translated some of their outreach materials. And since you're in the office today, I can share it with you. They even have a Hmong translation that they got. I cannot check it and see if it's accurate or not. So maybe you can, Sean. But it's a big milestone because there's growers growing both legally and illegally, and we want to get everybody into the program legally. But in terms of harm reduction, at least kind of be aware of what you're doing, and so getting that translated into a bunch of different languages is really important. Getting the word out there, making sure that you are protecting the watershed wherever you're growing. Forest Activities Program, huge, continue to advance a pesticide lab methodology development project. You heard a little bit about that from Angela in years past. It's a sampling technology that helps us get a better assessment of the watersheds and when you're dealing with huge watershed issues, and continue to work on commercial timber harvesting regulatory system streamlining. What's not on this is something we still hope to accomplish this fiscal year, not next fiscal year, is getting the federal permit to the board for adoption. We're kind of in the final stages of that. There's a huge amount of acreage covered by Bureau of Land Management, Department of Interior, and hopefully getting those under a new permitting structure will be an important milestone that we still accomplish this year. If we don't, definitely going on to next year, but we hope to have it before the board in the near future. Last but not least, enforcement and cleanup. Continue to maintain and enhance CV Salt's compliance initiative is a priority project for the compliance enforcement program. It's called out specifically in the executive officer's report. We have some diligence, some of our best enforcement teams, making sure that if you're in a nitrate control program area and you're not submitting your reports, you're going to have a talking to. And if you don't respond to that, you may get an ACL. And so those cases are being developed by the compliance wing of this office, and they will continue to work diligently on that because enforcement is such a key part of any program that we develop, especially those for nitrates. And last but not least, enhanced engagement with disadvantaged environmental justice communities and enforcement prioritization. There's a lot of efforts underway, some of it led by Cal EPA, some of it led by US EPA, some of it led by Office of Enforcement. A lot of focus. You may have heard US EPA Administrator Michael Regan talking about enforcement initiatives affecting disadvantaged communities, environmental justice communities, and our enforcement team is listening and participating in all of those efforts. Site cleanup program, and I think a lot of this is prioritization. We've got a lot of programs in the site cleanup program. We have some SCAP funding alignment. So SCAP is a site cleanup subaccount program, is a little carve out for cleaning up orphan sites. And we want to make sure that the orphan sites that we're cleaning up are orphan sites that are impacting disadvantaged communities, because that's where historically a lot of the impacts have been. That's a conversation that we're having with State Board. State Board has embraced that concept wholeheartedly, and so we will continue to work on case prioritization within that program. We're also reviewing public outreach procedures, making sure that when we have a site cleanup progressing, the folks in the community both know about it and know about it in terms that they can understand. And last but not least, emerging contaminants are a big concern in this program. PFAS has probably risen to the top as something that's showing up just about everywhere. Site cleanup program will be working on strategies to clean up sites where PFAS is impacting drinking water. All right. Clicking anymore. Should be one more. UST program, last but not least. Incorporating virus screen scores into case prioritization is a big deal for the UST program. UST program has been winding down for years and years. It is effectively closed most of the easy to close cases, and now we're stuck with the stubborn ones. The ones where, there's not a responsible party answering the calls. UST program, it's almost an automatic up to $1.5 million to clean a UST case. It's a very special program set up many years ago. That's a UST fund. And I wish there were funds in other areas to do that type of work. But if you are a small gas station owner and your tank leaked and you report that, you will be able to contract with somebody and get reimbursed from the state to clean up that site. So most it's an easy conversation often when you have a leaking underground storage tank release report because the funds are available. There's a surcharge on every gallon that's stored in an underground storage tank. It's something we pay every time we fill up the car. There's a little bit siphoned off to clean up those underground storage tanks. And last but not least, single wall tanks. The deadline is finally coming up. The tank that you see in the picture, that is not what a tank looks like these days. When you install a underground storage tank, it is a double walled tank. You often have kind of media surrounding the tank. You have leak detection systems. You just do not put a big canister in the ground anymore. And so the regulations will have the complete phase out of single walled tanks coming up in the very, very near future. Big win for water quality in the Central Valley and the state as a whole. And that's it. It's quite a lot that all of our programs do. Certainly welcome any feedback. I know, there's not a lot to decide because a lot of these were kind of decided last year when we set the racial equity goals. A lot of this is carrying that work forward, but any input, would be appreciated. You can certainly contact me afterwards. Steering these 19, big ships is a big effort. Program managers do a lot of work, and turning them, they do not turn on a dime. So if you want to kind of nudge a priority project in a different direction, let me know about it, and we'll be talking about it, how to get that issue addressed in the years to come.
Well, thank you, Patrick. That was really a lot of information, and it's pretty encouraging to see a plan in place for the coming fiscal year. And on top of how much progress has been made, if you look at the executive officer's report, I only had one question going back to why is there another agricultural expert panel? Is
Good
that another
question.
Is that a food safety panel?
No,
again?
It's not a food safety panel. So long story short, Region 3, rabble rousers that they are, tried to do something a little different with their irrigated lands order. They essentially took the directive from the state board in the East San Joaquin order, the one that we're implementing. They added a few bells and whistles, and the state board wasn't exactly happy about that, and issued a remand to Region 3, say, we want you to stay on this course. But I think the state water board was a little reflective in that decision, and said, but it's been a few years since we adopted the East San Joaquin order. Let's put, Region 3, you want to kind of do something more. We really want to kind of consolidate our efforts and have a statewide panel to really understand whether the East San Joaquin requirements are working or not. And that's kind of it in a nutshell. And we're kind of at the cutting edge of a lot of that, implementing the groundwater protection target kind of strategy. The conversations that we had down in Bakersfield certainly feed into that. But the idea would be that we kind of do a gut check and see if the East San Joaquin is working or not, because I think there's some stakeholders that say it's not doing a good enough job. There's others that, we've invested a huge amount of time and resources. We think it's on a good track, but I think there's a lot of stakeholders that want that kind of third party perspective. Are we doing okay? And you're right. This would be the fourth or fifth expert panel. I know there's at least a couple expert panels in advance of the East San Joaquin order that were convened by the State Water Board when they were deliberating on that. We had our oil field agricultural expert panel specifically looking at oil field wastewater, we had a surface water monitoring expert panel that also kind of convened to evaluate our surface water monitoring program. So this would, I think, be number 5 in recent history. But it's a good tool. It's a good tool. They're tough, and hopefully they'll give the appropriate people the money to implement this program. So we're not kind of raiding our own piggy bank to do that. But it's most of these expert panels have had good things to say, and the critiques that they've made have been well founded and have helped us kind of refine our program. So maybe we did too well with our earlier expert panels, because we made them into a good tool, and now it's a lever that they reach for whenever they've got a tough policy issue to consider.
Okay, thanks for clarifying that. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thanks, Patrick. I want to touch on the drinking water well monitoring outreach. It's I know it's a lot of effort to reach above the 13,000 wells. My concern here is approximately 32% of the wells exceeding the nitrate drinking water standard. And we have tried to reach out to them, and I see some response back from the owners. I'm just curious to what degree, as far as try to help them out and making sure that these nitrate situation are under control. What is our game plan?
It's happening in a lot of different areas. So the nitrate that's contaminating these drinking water wells is almost exclusively from agriculture. Right? I think the nitrate inventory, which was done, I want to say about 15 years ago now, academic paper that basically found 90 to 95% of the nitrates that are winding up in drinking water were contributed from nitrate fertilizer. And those practices continue. The way that crops are grown, virtually all crops are grown. There's some exceptions. I think table grapes are kind of the big exception, and maybe a couple others. Most of them use nitrogen application. There's some as when we looked at the upper watershed areas, there's others are grown, without nitrate application. But so the effort to kind of reduce that is the plan under CV salts is we work with the Irrigated Lands Regulatory Program, we work with the Confined Animals Program, and we work with the non-15 Discharge to Land Program, and gradually eliminate all of those sources of nitrate, make them compliant with drinking water standards on a schedule that's as short as practicable, but in no cases longer than 35 years. That means there's going to be some big changes to the growing practices that are happening throughout the valley. They're working on that right now. A lot of time and energy is being invested in that. And then in the interim, the idea is those wells get tested and water is delivered, either treated water, you plumb them into a local treatment system, you provide bottled water for a limited amount of time before you can get them hooked up to a system, or you have some other distribution system, point of use, point of entry treatment that helps those communities with the water. So that's big strategy is really to make sure that we address the sources of nitrogen, because this is a huge amount. I mean, a huge amount that's in both the aquifers and in the soil right now. and trying to, and again, they've made huge strides in reducing the nitrate inputs, but we've got to take it a little bit further to make sure that those drinking water resources are protected.
Thank you, Patrick. What do you have?
Yeah,
Yeah, go ahead.
definitely have some.
Yeah.
Yeah, I first of all, I just had one question about how is staffing capacity to maintain and address our priority projects, just to ensure that we're being responsive and appropriately addressing the water quality issues. Because you've mentioned cannabis and so many other programs with limited staff capacity. How are we able to handle
Doing the best we can with the resources that we have at our disposal. I think the priority projects that you see in front of you are a reflection of what we can do with the resources that we have. There are priority projects, I think, that would, if we had greater resources in some programs, we'd be proposing more ambitious priority projects. It's the role of the program manager to do an honest assessment of the resources that they have at their disposal and say, what can we do in addition to that? So you see, there's a couple programs up there that really did not have that ambitious priority projects, and that's okay. The division for all program managers is between core regulatory work and priority projects. And the core regulatory work is essentially bringing permits to the board for adoption, doing the monitoring, reviewing monitoring reports, getting cases closed, just the day-to-day work that nothing special, so to speak. It is special, it's tremendous work that's being done, but that's core work. That's our core regulatory work. The priority projects are, the program manager's assessment of, given all the resources that we have doing core work, how much can we spend on priority projects? And oftentimes, like the development of general orders in the land discharge program, those priority projects are a means of, maybe not next year, maybe not 2 years from now, but 3 years, 4 years, 5 years from now, these general orders will have some efficiencies that will allow us to kind of free up more time for priority projects in years to come. So it's always a tough discussion about resources. I imagine that's going to become even tougher with the current budget situation. I know lots of folks are hurting, and that includes members in the discharger community. So we're going to have some tough conversations ahead about resources, but we'll fight. I'll continue to make noise when we are at a point where our resources are not sufficient to cover our core regulatory work. And there's areas that could use additional resources, and I'll continue to have those conversations. It is a confidential process whenever we're talking about those proposals, but try and keep you as informed as I can.
Okay, well, I certainly appreciate the work that the management is doing to ensure that the priority projects, they're maximizing capacity as best they can to be able to deliver. And then just a comment, since I've been on the board, this is the first time I've seen those priority projects that's woven within every one of the projects, racial equity. It's about time, it's necessary. It's going to benefit the communities, and I'm glad to see it in the programming, and I'm hoping to see the benefits come out on the other side. So thank you very much. Thank you for the presentation today. It was great.
Oh, thank you. I'll also add, kind of in that area. It's been a long time coming, probably a little too long. But we've been working. I've been working with Office of Public Participation. And the new coordinators and some of our amazing staff to arrange a racial equity training for all the managers. It'll be a 2-day training. They're coming up to Sacramento, coming to this room, hearing from some of their own. Not to embarrass Rebecca Asami, but she is a trainer. Her and Maxine Cottrell will be giving a 2-day racial equity training to all the managers, Redding, Fresno, Rancho Cordova, all coming into this room to talk racial equity, to really make sure and hammer the point home that we have to be seeing our work through a racial equity lens, understanding when a community comes to us, what are they talking about? What are the concerns that they have? What is what is trauma-informed decision-making or trauma-informed comments when they come to us, that, it's not equal ground that we often stand upon when we're having these comments. So we have to go the extra mile to make sure that what we're doing is investing resources appropriately, given the history of this state and the history of this country. So very, very meaningful work, but going to be happening February 6th and 7th here in this office.
Hi, Patrick. This is a very tall order. I just want to say also that I've seen our racial equity goals peppered throughout every item. And I love how staff's been very sensitive towards communities who speak different languages and having that general understanding. I'm for one really excited about the updating of let's see here. It was the updating, the MS4 permits.
Yeah.
As the head of a local flood control agency,
Oh,
I
you
really,
bet.
really appreciate that. And I can't wait to see what we come up with. But yeah, this is great. I love where we're going and I'm excited for this new year.
Thank you so much. All right. And
Just want to jump back on to piggyback on the racial equity. As you alluded to, the extra effort of training so that our staff has a deeper understanding of the people that we try to help. I think that says a lot about our seriousness of trying to help the disadvantaged community. And that's really heartfelt for me. And I just want to say thank you for the effort. And I look forward to see some results.
Yeah.
So thank you so much.
Absolutely. And tomorrow's training should be good too. It's not just for staff. We'll have the training tomorrow, and it's something I know Denise instigated a little while ago, and we're making it happen. And it should be a good event tomorrow as well. So training is absolutely important, and I think that was kind of one of the things I know even the new managers here. Christina said, how much latitude do I have to send my staff to training? Well, you open as much as you want, let her rip. And so it's very much supported by all the management teams, even the new managers here at the board.
Thank you, Patrick. Really comprehensive and encouraging to see all the progress that we're going to get next year. Mindy, are there any interested persons who submitted a request to comment on this item?
No, there are none.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you. Definitely time for a bio break. So we'll adjourn for 10 minutes and be back to finish up. Thank you.
love her backyard. I love the fact that
Okay, folks, if we could think about getting this thing going again. Okay. Back in session, agenda item 6 is consideration of the minutes from the prior board meeting, which was held on October 12th. Are there any edits or corrections to the October minutes? And if not, can I get a motion in a second?
I'll move to approve the minutes from October 2023.
second.
Okay, we have a motion from Elena and Sean seconded. Mindy, if you could take the roll.
Board Member Yang,
Yes.
Board Member Kadara,
Yes.
Board Member Lee Reader,
Aye.
and Chair Bradford.
Yes. Next item is the uncontested calendar. This is the time and place for a public hearing to consider uncontested items 12 through 16. If you're a person at the meeting and wish to speak but have not submitted the speaker card, please fill out a blue card at the table in front of the boardroom entrance. If you're on the Zoom platform and wish to speak but have not emailed us, please raise your hand now. Mindy, has anybody submitted a request to comment on any of the uncontested items?
None,
Are there any late revisions?
none.
Okay, can I get a motion in a second? Yeah, approve that.
Motion to approve the consent calendar items 12 through 16.
Second.
Thank you. Elena and Sean have made a motion and seconded. Mindy, if you could call the roll.
Board Member Yang,
Yes.
Board Member Kadara,
Yes.
Board Member Lee Reader,
Aye.
and Chair Bradford.
Yes. Okay, next agenda item is item 8, discussion of the board work group assignments. This is a time and a place for a discussion on the board member work group assignments. Are there any comments from the board members regarding your current work group? And do any of you have a desire to participate in a different work group?
Chair Bradford, I would, because board member Abdus is
Yeah,
out today.
right.
My suggestion would be that we certainly entertain the discussion, but we also take the discussion into tomorrow as well. And one item to note, and this is a suggestion from staff, is there still is a Clear Lake Blue Ribbon Committee that is periodically meeting to discuss matters pertinent to Clear Lake. And the Blue Ribbon Committee is essentially talking to all sorts of agencies, local agencies, state agencies, about what to do to work towards restoration of Clear Lake. We've been an active participant of that, and Jen LeBay, a manager within this office, has been the board's designee. Board member Bob Schneider was the alternate. He volunteered to step aside and essentially frankly, he said he hasn't been on the board for a little while. So he offered to step aside. He will obviously remain engaged in Clear Lake issues. The proposal would be to actually form a Clear Lake work group, a couple board members that could have conversations and also have Adam be the alternate because he has been very, very involved with the Clear Lake issues. But we would regularly meet with board members, and board members could certainly come to the Blue Ribbon Committee as well. When those meetings would occur. It's one of those things where it was kind of done on his dime. The engagement level. Adam is there talking about things related to the Clear Lake TMDLs, the Sulphur Bank mercury mine remediation, tribal beneficial uses. All that mix is happening right now. But that would be my proposal: is to have Adam be the alternate, and then to actually form a board work group so that we'd have more than just one board member kind of involved in those particular issues. But again, that's the proposal that's out there. I'd love to have this conversation with Nick around too. I had hoped, frankly, when I teed this up, that we would have another board member or two participating in the conversation today. Governor's office did not do that just yet. I remain optimistic that we'll have one by the new year, but we'll see.
I would like to comment on this work group. I think that these work groups are very important in terms of the area of interest and concern. I would recommend it to see if we could have like a scheduled date, maybe at least one or two per year to touch on the area of interest.
Well, that sounds like a great idea, and we can incorporate that.
Thank you.
And do we need to make a motion to just carry it over till tomorrow?
No formal vote. No
Okay.
formal vote. Just kind of open the floor for discussion. I'm certainly not proposing any changes
Okay.
to what's out there right now. If there was a new voice in the mix, then maybe. But we've got 5 stalwart board members and lots of participation, lots of things to do. So not proposing any changes just yet, except for the Blue Ribbon Committee. And my suggestion would be that we continue that conversation tomorrow with Nick around.
I agree.
So Patrick, you said Bob is still engaged on Clear Lake.
He's still engaged, but I think his comment to me was that he probably should not be engaged as a board member because he hasn't been with the board for so long.
Okay.
He is very. I mentioned earlier the cleanup of the Elgin mine. His group Tuolumne is still doing fantastic work there. They're also continuing to advocate for national monument status or things like that for areas within Northern California. So he's doing a lot of good work. But he felt like representing the board was a bit of a stretch now that he hasn't been on the board for a few years.
Right. Okay, thank you. Yeah, I think deferring some further discussion till tomorrow makes sense when Nick is here. And we'll probably have to revisit it again in February or April when hopefully we'll have a full board by then.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah, fingers crossed. Okay. Agenda item 9 is removed from the agenda at this time anyway. And so moving on to agenda item 10 is the Hathaway LLC Kern-Tulare Water District issue. At this time, the board will consider the amended waste discharge requirements for Hathaway LLC, Kern-Tulare Water District, Jasmine Rancho's Mutual Water Company, and Jasmine Treatment Facility in Kern County. If you're a person in the meeting and want to speak but have not submitted the speaker card, please fill out that blue card at the front of the boardroom entrance. And if you're on the Zoom platform and wish to speak but have not emailed us, please raise your hand. Is there anyone present who is contesting the proposed actions and wishes to present evidence or testimony on this matter? I think we have someone. If you could introduce yourself.
Oh, I'm staff.
Oh,
I'll
okay,
do the
sorry.
presentation, sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. You faked me out there. So we can do the staff presentation then.
And let me just double check real quick. We had a group, I believe it's Residents Against Fracking. Are they present on the Zoom? Double check with Gene.
Not that I see, Patrick.
Yeah, can we double check and
Sorry, we have a Nicholas Savino and Sky Grass.
Yeah, Skygrass is with Kern Tulare Water District. They're one of the dischargers on this permit.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm in listening mode.
Thank you.
We may not have any opposition present for this particular item. We're just trying to double check that one more time.
Okay. So there's nobody there?
There's
I don't
nobody
see
present.
anyone.
Okay.
Right, I don't see anyone listed in the blue card list.
Okay. Thank you. So give you a presentation. Thank you.
We can proceed. You know,
With that.
I know in terms of this item, we can proceed with a vote based on the administrative record that's currently in the file. It's
Okay.
up to the board whether you want to receive a presentation. Most of the presentation is geared towards the commenters, and there are not any commenters who have showed up today.
Would anybody like the presentation? I'm okay. I've read through the comments and response to comments. Yeah. Okay. I think you're off the hook.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Since there's no one present to contest this matter, we will proceed based on the agenda materials in the record. Are there any late revisions or staff comments?
No late revisions.
Thank you. And does council have any legal issues to discuss?
No legal issues.
Thanks, Jessica. The hearing is now closed. The chair will entertain a motion to adopt the amended waste discharge requirements for Hathaway LLC, Kern Tulare Water District, Jasmine Ranchos Mutual Water Company, and Jasmine Treatment Facility. If I could get a motion.
Motion to amend the waste discharge requirements for Hathaway LLC.
Second.
Thank you. Mindy, if you could call the roll.
Board Member Yang,
Yes.
Board Member Kadara,
Yes.
Board Member Lee Reader,
Aye.
and Chair Bradford.
Yes. Okay. Okay, well, we're down to the last agenda item for the day, which is an update, agenda item 11. The update on the City of Sacramento's combined wastewater collection and treatment system, the McKinley Water Vault. This is an information item only. And no action will be taken, although the board may ask questions and provide direction to staff. Following the presentation, interested persons will be allowed 3 minutes each to address the board. And I think we've got one commenter that would like 5 minutes, which is fine. Okay. Floor is yours. I believe Jean will advance them. Yeah.
So on the keyboard, so I'll advance the slides. Okay, thank you. All right. Well, I want to thank you for this opportunity to present this informational item on the City of Sacramento's NPDES permitted combined sewer system. My name is Roxanne Billy. I'm a wastewater supervising engineer for the city's Department of Utilities. Information that we'll cover today will include an overview of the combined sewer system, an update on current tasks that the city is progressing on, information on the McKinley Water Vault, and we'll conclude with important findings. The combined sewer system area is 7,500 acres, consisting of downtown, East Sacramento, Land Park, and Oak Park areas. This system includes stormwater and wastewater in one pipe. These areas have historically been subject to flooding during heavy storm events due to insufficient conveyance capacity. An additional 3,800 acres of tributary separated sewer system, shown in the tan areas where the combined system is the green areas, conveys sewage only through the combined system. All summer and dry weather flows, as well as small to moderate storms producing up to 60 million gallons per day, are conveyed to the Sacramento region's regional wastewater treatment plant, which receives tertiary treatment before discharging to the river. This is considered stage 1 of 3 types of discharges to the Sacramento River permitted by our NPDES permit. Stage 2 discharges occur at our combined systems treatment facilities known as CWTP and Pioneer, where these flows receive primary treatment, which is floatable and debris removal, as well as disinfection. Stage 2 flows generated from this is due to storm events greater than 1 inch in depth or high intensity storms where we are producing flows from 61 million gallons per day to 540 million gallons per day. The stage 3 flows are untreated discharges to the Sacramento River and occur typically at our Sump 2 location and rarely occur. These flows are generated due to prolonged or rare frequency storms that exceed CWTP's and Pioneer's treatment capacity. We've had 1 occurrence of an untreated discharge in the last 10 years that occurred on October 24th, 2021. The city achieves permit obligations of 85% treatment of all annual flows. Our actual performance is greater than 90% treatment of flows, which is an overall water quality benefit to the Sacramento River and a key benefit of remaining a combined sewer system. Additional reasons to remain a combined sewer system include a high cost to separate and meet today's construction, drainage design, and water quality standards, as well as constructability challenges in the downtown area, a high disruption to the city's downtown core for a very long period of time. It would require a voter approval for a drainage rate increase for the new drainage collection system, and separated drainage systems provide minimal water quality benefit. Maintaining proper operation of the combined system, along with reducing flooding to the streets, requires extensive planning. The city has a long-term control plan for our combined system that utilizes an adaptive management strategy approach for complying with our long-term control plan goals of reducing untreated flows to the river, reducing street flooding during a 10-year storm event, which has a 10% chance of occurring in any given year, and preventing structural damage during a 100-year storm event, which is a 1% chance of occurring in any given year. Since 1997, the city has significantly invested in infrastructure improvements to reduce untreated discharges. This graph shows progress toward increasing primary treatment capacity since 1991. The blue represents primary treated volume of discharges, and the red represents untreated volume of discharges. Since the completion of combined system pump station and treatment facility improvements shown by the vertical dashed lines, there has been a significant reduction in the frequency as well as volume of untreated discharges. There have only been 5 untreated discharges in the last 25 years. The city is hard at work at updating the long-term control plan, which is due in October of 2024. Within this update, several tasks are occurring concurrently. We're conducting a build-out analysis for full development of the combined sewer system area. We're evaluating the top 20% of CIP projects, recalculating design storms with updated precipitation, running an analysis with available climate change data, and quantifying impacts to public health. In addition to the long-term control plan update, we are also progressing on a water quality assessment. The water quality assessment will evaluate the impacts of combined system discharges to the Sacramento River and its beneficial uses, including Sacramento's use for drinking water supply. This thorough evaluation is required periodically and was last conducted in 2013. Sampling has begun and will be completed in this storm season. This map shows the sampling locations and includes the effluent locations as well as the representative river locations. Other tasks that the city is progressing on related to the combined sewer system, we're conducting condition assessments of critical facilities. Development mitigation analysis is being conducted. Fee updates and rate planning are also in progress. The combined system contains old infrastructure with condition deficiencies, and we are identifying improvements for these critical infrastructure. Funding for these improvements will be competing with funding for storage projects. Staff are also identifying potential projects for mitigating increased sewer flows from completed developments utilizing combined system development impact fees. Fee updates and rate planning is also in progress or has been approved. We have a drainage rate increase that has been approved, but its funding for that is on hold until litigation. And some of this funding will be contributing to the combined sewer system infrastructure improvement needs. A development impact fee increase has been approved for both the combined system and the separated system. And the city is in progress with a fund audit for rate planning. Now that I've covered an overview of the combined sewer system, as well as current tasks that we're progressing on, we'll next talk about the McKinley Water Vault. The McKinley Water Vault is an offline storage situated in a park that has a 6.6 million gallon capacity, which is equivalent to 9 Olympic-sized swimming pools. The design for this vault for keeping water or reducing flooding to the streets utilizes a 10-year, 6-hour storm, which is 1.65 inches of precipitation in a 6-hour period of time. This project is a high priority project on the top 20% of the long-term control plan with the intent of reducing flooding to the streets. The cost was $32 million and became operational on October 15th, 2021. I have a short video to show you on how the McKinley Water Vault functions.
The McKinley Water Vault. It's needed to reduce East Sacramento street flooding when water from big storms exceed the combined sewer system capacity. And it's not just rainwater, because in East Sacramento, we have a combined sewer system that combines stormwater and wastewater. At maximum capacity, streets flood from excessive water or outflows of wastewater and stormwater. It's a mess, and it's time to fix it because it can cause significant property damage and flood neighborhoods. The McKinley Water Vault will temporarily store wastewater during large storms to reduce street flooding. The vault will drain into the combined sewer system as the storm subsides. All the wastewater from the vault will travel through a pipe to regional sand to be treated to high water quality standards before being discharged into the Sacramento River. The vault will not be used during dry weather months. It's that simple.
Since the vault became operational, we now have 2 storm events where we have data showing flows entering the vault. The first one occurred on October 24th, 2021, 9 days after the vault became operational. The combined sewer system area received approximately 5.62 inches of precipitation in a 24-hour period of time. This table shows you the Sacramento region's precipitation depth data for the various storm frequencies and durations. The yellow highlights, you can see that this 5.62 inches received most closely represents the 500-year 24-hour storm event, which has a 0.2% chance of occurring in any given year. This is significant note because we designed for street flooding for a 10-year, 6-hour storm, shown in red, with 1.65 inches. And to prevent structural damage, we designed for a 100-year, 24-hour storm, which is 4.25 inches in depth. So the 5.62 inches we received significantly exceeded our design criteria. The McKinley's vault sensors indicated a complete fill, which means 6.6 million gallons of combined wastewater was held underground and off of the streets and surrounding areas. City staff took this 6.6 million gallons in addition to the estimated volume of the observed flooding that did occur, utilized drafting tools and available topography data, and developed this visual of what the inundated area may have looked like without the vault in service. With the vault in service, the extents of this 500-year event were limited to what you see in red. City staff also took the precipitation data and inputted it into our hydraulic model for the combined system and evaluated what the pre-vault and post-vault results look like using modeling data. Modeling predicted results showed a 48% reduction and an 8-inch depth reduction in the area along Parkway between 34th Street and 35th Street. The second event that occurred happened on January 9th, 2023, where we received several back-to-back long-duration storms lasting from December 29th to January 11th. During the January 9th storm system, it was calculated that this system had a 2.7 12-hour storm event, which is a more common event with a 37% chance of occurring in any given year, and the combined system received 1.58 inches of precipitation. Vault sensor data indicated a partial fill of the vault of 3.36 inches and an inflow duration into the vault of 40 minutes. The cause of the partial fill was determined to be lack of local system conveyance due to the collection system not being able to drain between the back-to-back storms. There were no known wastewater outflows to the surface. So in conclusion, the city has these important findings. The McKinley Water Vault is performing as intended. The city is exceeding permit treatment criteria. The city is working to reduce flooding to the streets. The city is progressing on fee updates and rate planning, and that storage vaults are expensive and implementation will need to be evaluated along with improvements for condition deficiencies of our critical infrastructure. The adaptive management strategy will continue to be used to evaluate and address needs of the combined system infrastructure to ensure system operation continues to protect people, property, and the environment. This concludes my presentation. Do you have any questions?
I had one question where you mentioned the 5.62, the rain, where we had the heavy rain and the red area that was impacted. What kind of damage was it? I mean, I know it was far less than what was anticipated, so we know that that vault did work, but what kind of damage was there and how would you go about mitigating that in the future? If that makes sense.
So mitigating for a 500-year event would be challenging.
You show where the red area was.
So what the response was to that.
So what was the response, and then what will you be doing to kind of help control that area? Should we have, because we're fluctuating and not knowing when and what's going to happen, how we could address that?
The observed flooding extent showed exceeding curb height and reaching onto like yards, people's yards. Which is a 10-year event, as we're trying to just keep it away from structural damage.
And we did not have any structural damage except for what you just said.
And I think that was a basement didn't have backflow prevention. Which we remedied and worked with that homeowner to add backflow prevention because it was able to get into their basement.
Well, I think that from The vault has done the job it's supposed to do, even in where you have
An extreme event.
the extreme event. And
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just curious.
Yeah, it could have been structural
Yeah,
damage
it
with
could have
that
been.
event had the vault not been in place.
Okay.
And that's our goal, is to minimize structural damage in those types of
I-
events.
Okay, I like the graphic too, that it illustrated everything.
Thank
It
you.
made it so simple to
right.
understand. Thank you.
Thank you. Any others?
Hi, Lee Reader here. I remember that December 29th precipitation storm. It was a nail biter. And I remember just sheets of rain just coming down. And I also wear a hat with RD 1000. And so I totally get it. I'm just curious as to how far along you are on your CIP. You talked about finding more additional funding in your capital improvement plan, or have you fully analyzed all of your inventory? Like, that's what we did. We categorized everything. And so I'm just wondering, how far along are you on that process?
So I'll try to just separate, I think, some of your questions. We're continuing to evaluate our long-term control plan and all the projects we have for reducing flooding. Then we also have a repair and rehab program as well. And then categorizing our assets, we have an asset management program. The combined system has the majority of all of our assets in our model, as well as in our GIS databases. So I'm not quite sure on finishing assets on that piece. If you can clarify that a little bit more.
A life cycle analysis on our equipment. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's ongoing.
We're updating another model for asset management, and that one will also come out and show what risk you're at, and it takes CCTV data. But the life cycle, we are exceeding our life cycle, but our CCTV data analysis is showing that it is still serviceable and many are still in good shape. So we have another model that will assess risk based on scoring done from CCTV, and they'll categorize that into like a very high risk area, a high risk, a medium, low risk, and low, and it'll categorize everything for us. We just finished some refinements to that. We then have to update the model with current CCTV to start getting more extensive data. The last time it was done in 2019, but we needed to do some refinements, and I wanted to expand it out. So it didn't just show me the high risk categories. I wanted to show the medium risk categories so that I can do more long range planning with more data.
I was just curious because, McKinley Park is one of our neighbors, and when you enjoy the amenities of the park, you would never, ever assume there's a water vault underneath. And so very exciting stuff. You can't tell because I'm sick, but very exciting stuff.
Yeah. Any other questions?
I driving by McKinley Park, you don't notice that it was ever done, which, they did a great job on the revegetation and so on. I know the neighbors weren't happy during construction, but it'd be worse if you ripped up the streets and put in a new sewer system. So, as you noted, so thank you. It was a really good presentation, and it seems like the vault is working, and the data you presented in terms of treatment of outfall was convincing. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Mindy, are there any interested persons wishing to comment on this item?
Yes, Melinda Johnson is here in person. She is representing Citizens for a Safe and Sewage-Free McKinley Park. She will be showing a 2-minute video as part of her 3 minutes. She actually has 5 minutes. Oh, sorry. Okay.
I've got my car parked so no cars will run into this huge water body.
The sound isn't up on the video.
As you can see, we've got a flood that extends all the way down 34th Street, ever to 30.
Could we just hold the video and I'll introduce the video? No.
They're working on it.
Hi, my name's Melinda Johnson. Please forgive me. My ears are both seriously plugged, so I'm having a hard time hearing. I live in the McKinley Park neighborhood, 1 block from the city's sewage vault. On October 24th, 2021, the vault failed its first test. A large storm overwhelmed the system. Raw sewage and stormwater flooded our neighborhood. I've documented this in a short video. You can see it on savemckinleypark.com. It's 26 minutes long. It shows the flooding of the homes, etc. You're about to see just a few minutes of that particular video. The vault failed to protect people and property from flooding as falsely promised. The problem will be solved only when Sacramento builds a separated sewer system. I urge you to view the 26-minute video at savemckinleypark.com showing the flood. The raw sewage left the following day, and the sewage still left after the city's cleanup. Thank you. And hopefully the sound will come up.
This is 10/24/21, Melinda Johnson. I've
That's
got
my
car
street.
parked so no cars will run into this huge water body. As you can see, we've got a flood that extends all the way down 34th Street, over to 33rd, down Parkway, and all the way back up Parkway over to 35th. There's a city truck responding to the massive flooding that is on 33rd Street that's disabling people from getting into their properties with their cars. And also, needless to say, is spreading contaminated water all over our lawns and all over the park. October 25th. Here we have the big sucker truck, as the neighborhood has come to love to call it, driving off. Here they are at the grates, the very problem grates, which belch toxins into our neighborhood, both in odor and in this sewage form, which we've got everywhere. As you can see, it's a big operation they've got going here. I want to take a close-up of what sewage looks like in our streets. You can see that somebody's dog has already walked through it. You know, this is just too close to people's homes. I'm standing in someone's front yard right now. That's how close it is to their houses. Look at that. Just sewage. Thank you. I've been graciously given 2 minutes more to speak, and I would like it to be noted that I am now speaking as a private tax-paying citizen. A few years back, I gave a presentation to this board on the failures of the combined sewer system and the flooding of individual homes and properties. At that time, the board decided to limit the term of the NIPED's permit. Since the vault was built, the street drains of McKinley Park and much of downtown and midtown continue to reek of sewage. Well-meaning neighbors pour gallons of Clorox down them to keep the stench from permeating their properties. Last night in Trader Joe's, a neighbor told me that her grandson's McKinley Park soccer game was the week before. The parents were complaining that the sewage stench was coming up from the grass. Homes were flooded and during this last flood. Okay. On October 24th, 2021, city workers did a non-sanitary cleaning for a full day. No hazmat suits on the employees nor protection of any kind for the residents. After the cleanup, soiled toilet paper and anything else that goes down a toilet, please think about that, was found on neighbors' homes, yards, patios, sidewalks, and in McKinley Park's much-loved children's Ferry House play area on Parkway. The lab results revealed that Escherichia E. coli, fecal streptococcus, and coliform bacteria, too numerous to count, were found in our streets, yards, patios, and porches after the city's non-sanitary cleanup. The flooding was chest deep in places. Make no mistake, this is a serious concern.
Within hours of the city cleanup, the city had brought out a news crew and was interviewing one of the engineers, touting the great success of McKinley Park's water vault's first usage and how gloriously the vault had performed during the storm of October 24th. Later that week, city engineers dug up parts of 33rd Street, attempting to find out where the failure was. All of this is well documented in photographs and film. Please help the neighbors of McKinley Park find a resolution to these ongoing unsanitary living conditions, which we have been trying to resolve for decades. For decades. I started in 2001, and it was going on before that. Every time a major storm is predicted, we live with fear of yet another sewage flood. What you can do as water board, do what you can do as water board members to limit the NIPED's permitting of this inefficient and band-aid of a project. I urge you to help the tax-paying citizens of McKinley Park get a proper separated sewer system and stormwater runoff system for our neighborhood. The city installed the new sewer pipes years ago under our streets, went door to door to explain the project to us, how they were going to hook us up, but then they abandoned the project with no explanation to homeowners. Our city neighborhood populations are too dense for this type of temporary solution. With the planned housing density in Midtown, downtown, and probably now in the Alhambra corridor, and with future climate predictions and last year's 14 consecutive atmospheric rivers, we should be doing what San Francisco is doing. Separate the system, one neighborhood at a time. Open up the streets, separate it. Our pipes are already under there. No more Band-Aids. They are only a temporary solution to allow for more development. If any of you wish to view our PowerPoint presentation, our full-length video from SaveMcKinleyPark.com, or view lab reports on the E. coli, fecal streptococcus, and coliform bacteria found on our yards after the city cleanup, please contact me or any of us at SaveMcKinleyPark.com. I want to thank you very much for your patience. I know I'm talking very loud, but it's because my ears are so plugged. Thank you. Any questions?
Thank you. I mean, I feel for you. I know it's a disgusting scenario you just described. And I think the projections that were presented by the city show it hopefully will be infrequent, but climate change is climate change and we don't know what's going to happen. I am curious, I guess this might be a question for the city about the abandoned sewer line or the sewer lines that were installed and then not hooked up.
Yes,
Is
they
there-
tore up the whole, several streets, I think 42nd as well. Put the pipes in, the big blue pipes, came door to door, told us how they were going to route our sewer out to the street, and then abandoned the project. We were told the funds for the project had been reappropriated for something else.
Mhm. Okay, I wasn't aware of that.
Yes, this has been, you have to be there to see it. Please watch the 24-minute video. You chest deep water, people trying to get their kids out of their houses. One woman's carrying her mother, her older mother, on her back in waist deep water on McKinley Boulevard. We can't live like this. Thank you.
Thank you. Does the city have any response to some of those comments or?
Hello, I'm Cheryl Hune. I'm our Engineering Division Manager for the Department of Utilities. I just wanted to mention, I'm not sure what projects or pipes that the resident is referring to. So all of our infrastructure that is in place in that neighborhood is connected and is operating. And the projects that we've been presenting are work in the area that we've been doing. So I'm not aware of what she's referencing, but we can look into it and get back to you if needed. I asked one of our supervising engineers to come up and talk a little bit about the response to the event. And although there was a significant amount of water on the street that came up into people's yards, how quickly it receded, and then the city's response time to get out there and clean up the water in the neighborhood.
Hello, I'm Lisa Moretti. I'm a supervising engineer with the City of Sacramento Department of Utilities. I'm responsible for MPDS permit compliance. So I just wanted to give a little more information. As we showed, the vault holds approximately 6 million gallons, and that was designed to reduce the impact that you saw during that October event, a 500-year event. Throughout the city, we were dealing with flooding as a stormwater and sewer agency. This was just one location that was handling this 500-year design storm. As spoken, our design criteria within a city is a 5-year and a 10-year, with not having damages to structures at 100-year. So this far exceeded design criteria that we have across the whole city. To just put it a little in context of that night. And within the context of that night, we know that the vault began filling and was full around 5 p.m. at night. Around 10 p.m., we know that the storm had started to recede, and that at that point, we were able to start reducing the volume and allowing that flood water to go back into our system. So I just want to put a consideration, a 500-year event, and we're talking about 4 hours of experiencing that. As soon you saw during the video, our trucks responded immediately, set up a exclusion zone to keep citizens safe from the area that was impacted. They started by brooming the solids, then they washed it down with a disinfection. We have pictures and videos, pictures showing the responses of our crew the next morning. We understand the issue. The combined sewer system is a legacy of being a very old city. San Francisco experiences these same issues. And every time new development goes in for parcels, we do require that they have separated pipes. So progress is incremental in a system this old. And with a system this old where you have pipes in backyards, everything is done in very small increments. Even a $6 million gallon vault, $32 million to construct to be able to work in the combined sewer system. So I just wanted to put it a little in context, but we do understand the neighbors' concerns, and that's why this was built, to be able to reduce these kind of events happening on the future. But I'm happy to take any other questions.
Yeah, I appreciate that information. And I also want to say thank you for the residents that come to the podium and express their concern, which is a very big concern. Now, just for clarification first, is this the first time it ever flooded in this capacity?
The first time the streets ever experienced this flooding in this capacity?
Right.
I'm going to have to go back. So this storm was historical. The last time we experienced it flooding at this much was way before my experience at the city in the 90s.
Yeah, I don't have data on the actual various storm events that we've had historically. I will say this is an area where the city had noted that there is flooding and outflows from the system. That's why it was prioritized for a project. So before this project, we did have outflows in this neighborhood before.
Okay. And I'm just curious, is there any planning or future planning as far as improving the vault and in the sense of emergency in this, 500-year rainstorm?
So the goals within our permit are to look at flooding within a 5-year and 10-year storm event. So our long-term control plan update as required by our NTPDS permit has a process that we're using to evaluate areas where flooding is occurring and to be able to prioritize what projects are going in.
And last question, do we know if we have the budget allocated for this type of upgrading? If there is any?
Hi, my name is Pravani Vandya. I am the Director of Utilities. Unfortunately, funding is a huge challenge. Our stormwater rates were not upgraded or increased since the 90s. We recently had a stormwater fee increase that we implemented last year. However, that is currently being litigated, so we're not allowed to use that money. That money is meant to go towards critical infrastructure projects that have been prioritized. So we're in a holding pattern. We do have important work that needs to happen in our system, but we're not able to do it because we do not have sufficient funding to do it. Your question regarding the upgrades, if we're talking about separating the systems, that is significant funding that is needed. Rates would increase tremendously and probably become unaffordable for our ratepayers. So those are all things we have to evaluate in terms of how we decide what improvements can be made, and factoring in everything that's out there, including the science for climate change and what predictions indicate in terms of future storms. So going back to what staff indicated, we do those evaluations and projects get prioritized. That's how the McKinley Vault got prioritized, and we completed that project. So it is a complex situation that has no simple solutions.
And I'll comment, it's something that we look at quite closely, and I think Adam can comment on some of the exact permit terminology, but to a certain extent, this is an incredibly difficult decision for the municipal wastewater and the city to make, because if you're going to separate that portion, you're talking about something in hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars to upgrade and to rip out most of the infrastructure in downtown Sacramento and East Sacramento. And so the course that they've chosen instead is to, as new developments come online, to try to disconnect them. That's why you saw those areas in kind of near the river where they're now on municipal separate storm sewer systems. So there's some areas that they're converting, and to really do an analysis of new systems that are connecting into the system to make sure that they're not loading. And as came up in the hearing for the order, the problem is a little less on the sewage side. It's more on the fact that if you get a 500-year storm event, the water getting into that system is from the stormwater. It's mixing with the sewage, and that's what creates the problem. So they've got a situation where they're spending tens of millions of dollars to build a vault and to expand infrastructure. You have this stubborn problem within this neighborhood affecting a few houses, affecting a block or two. And, that's something that the city is working to mitigate as hard as it can. The alternative is to surcharge all the ratepayers to the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars. And so that's the really difficult municipal decision that they have to make. In terms of where the permit lies, we have standards that are satisfactory to just about all the city except for this neighborhood. And rightly so. It is absolutely, as Mark said, disgusting to see even once in a while, even once every couple years, every few years, every decade or so to see, human feces in the gutters. That is something that's extraordinary, and it's tough to live with. And I'll note that while San Francisco and Sacramento are the two cities in California that are struggling with this, it is a relatively common problem on the East Coast where they're also struggling with this. And with climate models changing and increased precipitation, it has a greater sense of urgency to make sure that we're mitigating the negative effects of this as much as possible.
I appreciate the city staff and Patrick for providing detailed information. Appreciate it.
And I just like to ask the question, what mitigation measures are in place right now to prevent any future flooding or damages? I mean, we're talking about residents that are impacted. And I know there's shortage of funding, but what's happening or what will happen to prevent or minimize this impact on this community, this neighborhood?
So that's where our long-term control plan comes into play, and our adaptive management strategy is we'll implement this plan, which has probably about 30 storage projects. These are planning level projects where we have to assess them further, and as we get closer to going into design, to make sure they're constructible. So there's more projects that we plan on putting in, and they will all work in concert. We have conveyance project improvements as well as storage project improvements. It'll take many years to complete. And so what you're just seeing is the top 20% of those projects being implemented now. And with the rest of the projects in play, we should be seeing less and less, but we're also contending with higher precipitation rates. So that's where we go back and we evaluate what was implemented. We monitor what we can and try to make updates to our plan. And so we're in the process right now of evaluating and implementing what we have started and updating our plan. So these larger storm events, we're going to have we're going to be more challenged of trying to manage those. So we do have another project that's due to be constructed here pretty soon in other areas. And hopefully once everything's in, we'll see improved, but we may still have some issues with really large storm events.
So in other words, if we had major flooding storms today, this area could be impacted again.
Yeah, it's in a very low-lying area. And if you look at what we call LIDAR, the map, you can see where Old River went through there. So it's it would require, and it's something that we can evaluate. We can look at with our other improvements is like, can we put in a small lift station and try to lift it to another separated drainage basin? But can that separated drainage basin take those flows? Would we have to then improve that? And with no money for our separated drainage system at this particular point in time, it's not something we consider, but we do like looking for alternative ideas of how we could help manage this and what would be in an economical way and with the minimal impact to the neighborhoods when we're doing these projects, because they are a major disruption to
and I'm thinking about after Hazmat came out and did its job as far as cleaning up the mess, that the residents still had residue of all that. And then the kids are still playing in the park that has some of that.
That's there all the time with or without outflows. And we could have Lisa talk more on just what's natural in the environment.
Oh, sorry. Yep. Response.
Okay.
So, for what happened in terms of the response, when issues like this happen where we have outflows, we have a response plan. And the response plan is we go and we do cleanup. Cleanup includes, like I said, removal of the solids, establishing that exclusion zone, and then finishing the cleanup with washing down the area. I believe we took out the water board within a day. Is that right, Adam? So maybe Adam, if you could speak to what you saw when you came out the next day, but Adam was able to do a tour the following day. So I don't want you to take my word for it.
I actually was not able to do, I was not there. It was some of our compliance and enforcement staff that went out, is my understanding.
Okay, it was Paul Wadding then?
Afterwards, right? And certainly we can, if there's a wish to kind of see some of what their findings were, I'm sure we could provide that.
I'm just concerned of the public health to the residents. To when they go outside on their lawns and sit and have a picnic and all of that stuff, or whatever they do, or in the park, that residue, the waste and all that stuff that was once there, that there's nothing left that could cause any public health issues. That's the question I'm asking, because it's not like this is going away, it's continuing to happen. And what can be done to minimize that impact to that neighborhood that's going to continually have these problems until there's enough dollars or something to address the concern. So,
and I believe it's actually in the executive officer report. So there's a lot of, unfortunately, there's a decent amount of sewer overflows from not just combined systems, but from, appropriately functioning sewer systems over the course of a year. And I don't want to say it's a standard response, but there's a relatively standardized response. You go into the area, you make sure that you do appropriate testing and follow up, and you clean up the area. I think our enforcement team found that the city of Sacramento did an appropriate job of the follow-up cleanup. And again, I think those pictures were before the cleanup actually happened, or was kind of fully completed. But you do that, both visual inspection and water quality chemistry inspection afterwards, to make sure that that residue isn't there. I am not sure what they're talking about kind of residue at the park, because the main area of the park did not flood, and those areas were cleaned up afterwards. We have the inspection reports, and we could have our in compliance. If you want some follow-up, our compliance enforcement team was there and took a look at the cleanup. So if there's residual contamination, they can certainly file an environmental complaint on our complaint system, and we will follow up. We follow up with all of those complaints, but I think to our follow-up, it was cleaned up. I didn't necessarily see a pathway, and I know there are comments about the smells coming from both municipal separate storm sewer systems and combined systems. That is kind of part of there's decaying material, plant material, leaf material that can create smells everywhere in the sewer system. But I believe we did follow up. Our enforcement team did follow up with a sharp eye to making sure that was cleaned up in the aftermath of that. And again, the flooding apparently was only for one evening. And it was gone the next day. I know there are a lot of communities where flooding is for weeks or longer. And certainly that's a concern. It's a concern to us anytime that there is flooding of these type of systems. But the order of magnitude is certainly impactful for that community. But there are other communities in very dire circumstances as well.
So Denise, I can also kind of touch on one of your other questions about, how do we know what the impacts, public health, things like that. This was brought up at the permit hearing back in 2020. And we actually, in response to some of those concerns, we added a requirement in the permit for them to work with public health to kind of evaluate that issue. And that report's due with their report of waste discharge for their updated permit, which is coming up. The report of waste discharge should be coming in 2024. So that'll have that report. We also recognize the issues of climate change and the concerns of, kind of this, whether or not we're going to see more flashy events and more intense rainfall events. And this is something that we also added to the permit, and that was a reevaluation of the 5, 10, and 100-year storm events, given new climate information to determine if, they are managing this properly, given that possible change. And the last thing we did is because of this concern of funding and how we're going to deal with these issues, we added another requirement in the permit is that was to kind of estimate 30-year build out flows of the system. So, essentially kind of figure out what your long-term kind of growth is going to be here, and determine if, if that growth is going to tax the system more and cause outflows to increase. And the idea is we're making them decrease, right? The McKinley Vault, all these projects are in line with their NPDES permits requirements. And that is, we want the trajectory of those to be coming down. And so the idea was to kind of, let's look at that build out strategy. Let's determine if, that there is new sewage, new generation of wastewater that might tax the system and cause problems in that build out plan. So we're going to be looking really closely at those studies when it comes in. And at the permit hearing, obviously there'll be more discussion.
And I'll add kind of one more thing in terms of mitigation, because I know you asked a question about mitigation. We've looked at this issue nationally too. What can you do to mitigate this? And I think I don't envy where the city is, and we will keep pushing the city for sure. But part of the issue is, this is some of the most expensive real estate in Northern California, some of the most high value homes, some of those high value parks in Northern California. And, other cities, the way they've helped solve and eliminate these issues, they buy up some property and they build some stormwater ponds, additional stormwater retention features and things like that. We have multi-million-dollar houses left and right in these areas. You cannot go in and buy up a third of an acre, 2 acres, 5 acres, and build a stormwater, retention pond to help alleviate some of the pressure in this area. Instead, you look at kind of innovative solutions like the McKinley Vault, which was in itself, again, 6 million gallons. That's a lot, but that's a $32 million project. If you were in a different neighborhood, if you were in a different area, you could build that infrastructure much more cheaply and make a surface water pond or something else like that to help eliminate that inflows. But it's really, they're looking at the price tag and they're looking at what the ratepayers are. And, it's a brutal decision, right? And it's a tough decision. I know for just about every city on the East Coast that has these combined sewer systems, it's like, if we really, really want to replumb this whole thing, you're talking about doubling, tripling your average ratepayers' bills. That is a big deal. And that's even aside from the additional hurdles that we have here in California for raising rates for this. So it's a tough decision. I don't envy the decision. From the regional board's perspective, I'm not saying they're kicking and screaming, but we're adding more costs here. We're asking them to do more studies. We're asking them to use their imagination, see what else can be done. Because we don't want these, these surcharges to the system, these overflows and things like that. So, but it's a tough decision to make, and especially in these older cities that are built out and still very desirable places to live in and to recreate.
For your answers to that question.
Interject something.
Yeah, why don't you come up, use the mic.
The neighborhood of Parkside Terrace that's built around the park is the lowest lying neighborhood area in Sacramento. It was a poor placement for the vault. We fought it in the beginning. A large water body called Burns Slough, which was a navigable waterway that schooners would take to get from the Sacramento River onto the American River to avoid the rapids at the confluence. Tall ships were able to go through that water body. The city was made aware of that, but they built the vault directly on top of Burns Slough, the huge water body that's been diverted underground on the lowest lying real estate in the city. That's the problem. I just thought that might be interesting background information for you.
I'm not an engineer, but that's usually where you put it. And I think the challenge is, all of Sacramento was periodically underwater for much of its history.
This
and
is
I think
the
that's
lowest point in the city.
I understand that, and probably not an area where we'd build homes at all if we were designing the city
Right.
from scratch today. But it's also the area where you would have the gravity would bring the stormwater, and that's where you probably want to collect it and not be pumping it into other areas. So again, I understand the concern, but it's a challenging circumstance. You know, Sacramento is a city that used to flood. It used to flood quite regularly, and you know, that's a history that we're still grappling with.
Yes, I'm aware of the history of the engineering of the waterways of Sacramento. Our system that we are using right now, for anyone who is unaware of this, was built in the late 1800s. We're now in the 2000s. Our sewer pipes are made out, when they dig them up, they're made out of brick. They're constructed this way with brick, all the way underneath the area of McKinley Park. I really think that we need a separated system for these low-lying areas throughout the city that suffer from flooding year after year, multiple times during a year. And for anyone's information, please watch our full video, 24 minutes long, on savemckinleypark.com. You will see photographs of the things from people's toilets that were laying on our lawns after the city's unsanitary cleanup. Thank you for giving me this little extra time. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. And all I will say is that from hearing from our executive officer and assistant executive officer, the water board is doing its due diligence to protect the water quality. So the city has a lot more work to do. They're strapped for money, but we're hopeful that you won't have to experience that soon, that it will get addressed.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And I guess I just add, I mean, it's pretty clear that the vault did prevent a wider event back in October of 2021. And so, but that doesn't provide any solace to the people who were affected, obviously. I guess the one thing I would comment on, given the fact that there isn't funding available for either a separate sewer system, there is money being invested for updating some of the facilities and the conveyances, but the response, I know in a citywide flood event like we had in last January, people are looking for support, storm drain clearance all over town. I would hope that there'd be a priority given to the McKinley Park. The first team that goes out would go to McKinley Park and try to deal with the situation as the number one priority for the city. And I am curious, I think maybe at a follow-up, I'm curious what the enforcement team discovered when they went out there the next day, and maybe take a look at their report to see if they observed the same types of things that Ms. Johnson was describing.
JJ, I think he's taking notes right now.
Thank you. Any other comments? Well, thank everybody from the city and citizens that came forward with this issue. It's as Patrick said, the main description is challenging, I think, financially and from a public health perspective and just a nuisance perspective. But I'm kind of relieved that there is a lot of attention being placed on this issue. And that it's not a voice in the wilderness. We hear what you're saying, and hopefully things will improve.
I would absolutely second that. Please keep making noise.
Yeah.
We will continue to hear it. I don't know if the vault, as contentious as it may be, our engineers view it as it has mitigated things, and I don't know if it would have been built had it not been for engaged citizens saying we need to stop this problem. And so if you keep the pressure up, we can keep the pressure up and continue to work with the city to try and mitigate this. I don't know if the solution will be a separate system, but we'll certainly be continuing to push for additional upgrades to make sure that this does not happen in the future.
Okay, well, thank you, everybody. I believe that's our last item. All the other agenda items were on the uncontested calendar. So with that, I think we can adjourn for today. We'll be back tomorrow at 9 o'clock. Thank you.
Yeah. Good. How you been? This is Danielle Moss. This is Glenn Tyner from the Living office. Yeah. Yeah. Kicking off. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.